Special thank you to Maximilian, dude, Sleepezi, BabySeal, and TheNightSkyPrince for coming together and making this long requested video an actual real thing, guys. This was a long requested one for many years now, and I'm happy to bring the edited version of it on YouTube for you guys to enjoy. This will be the full entire conversation. I've only edited in gameplay moments and certain cutscenes just so you guys can visually get a representation of whatever it is that we're talking about in certain scenes. I didn't go too crazy with it towards the end because I know a lot of people really want to see the reactions and stuff, and it's a really fun conversation. The live stream version is still on the channel. If you guys want to watch that, it's going to be linked down below in the description with no interruptions, and you'll be able to watch it and see all the messages the live stream was saying with the chat. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell to help raise that 38% even higher. And now with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the podcast.
I don't think we're live yet. I think this is more like a world, not like a multiverse. It's like a world, like a world of thoughts and emotions.
Yeah, this is hopes and dreams, baby.
This is just, you know, at some point an Omni character of some kind, Omni Nomura, is going to show up and he's going to be like, listen.
Over the last 4 years, one of the most like commented things on my channel and in general videos and like tweets and stuff that I've seen is like people want to see this group get together and just talk FF7 shop, whether it be like theories, combat stuff, lore, all of that crushed in between. It's a dream come true to see it like happen for myself. Like I'm kind of like, I don't know how to like handle this going in. It's kind of pretty hard. It's kind of impressive, but you guys already know we got Schrodingersbabyseal, we got TheNightSkyPrince, we got Sleepezi, myself, and you guys know Max.
Hello, how's it going?
Welcome, man.
I'm retweeting all of this stuff. It's happening so fast. Hi everybody, good to see everybody here. I know I've had like the chance to talk to a variety of you on like individual occasions somewhat, not even everybody, through in-person media events and otherwise, but actually sitting down on a chat and dissecting this stuff is going to be great because we're all wrong. Yes. Seemingly everything that we all think is happening with this game is probably wrong, so it's going to be fun to deluge into it.
That's actually funny that you mentioned that. So technically this is our reunion of some sorts because we all did get to meet last year for that FF16 event in person, and that was actually
my brain goes to the Summer Games Fest right before it, where a lot of us were there and like hanging out and talking about even FF7 then.
So I actually want to start off with like our first impressions. So the initial thoughts going into like Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth leaving Remake, for me, and I just kind of like jump into that, I will straight up say I didn't think that they were going to be able to execute what they did for Rebirth. Like I had my expectations set incredibly low because in the announcement and all that stuff going into Remake and hearing that they're going to be expanding Midgar and all that, my mind immediately went to like, oh, we're going to be able to roam Midgar, go around and do all this extra stuff. And while they did expand like the lore aspect, not necessarily the world traversing of like Midgar, I wouldn't say it left me disappointed, but I was like, oh, okay, that's what they meant. So going into like Rebirth, before we even saw what we saw at Summer Games Fest, I straight up was like tempering expectations. Like I didn't think that we were going to get big zones like what we got. I thought it was just going to be like from chapter to chapter, we're going to be jumping from town to town and maybe roam around in some areas. So I was genuinely shocked when I saw Summer Games Fest, and then again in September when they showed actual world traversing with like vehicles and all that. It's mind-blowing to even think that is actually a thing. What did you guys think going from Remake to Rebirth? Like, were you blown away in that sense?
Yes, there was a tempering of expectations when we saw what was effectively happening with the previous game, where it's like, oh, okay, so we get it, you know, we understand that this is what we can expect for the next game, specifically gameplay wise. And it felt like a lot of the storytelling beats were coming up with effectively reasons to tag us along for this journey that we knew we'd have to wait 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 8 years in between or something like that, because we didn't know how long it was going to take. I'm with you in that Remake did a lot for me personally, where it's just I think the thing I wanted out of that game the most, outside of having incredible combat and stuff like that, was characters. And this I'll talk a little bit later about fan service, because this game loves it. But to a certain degree, I don't feel like we did a lot of the characters justice in Final Fantasy 7 throughout like the compilation, you know, like in terms of like, hey, we're just going to give you these things you've always wanted. Well, I didn't really get that in Dirge. I got maybe a little bit of it in Crisis Core. Zack is a human in a world of psycho anime protagonists. So it's like, what is happening here? But still, everything of those compilation elements left me wanting more, outside of some obvious Advent Children fight scenes and things like that. You know, that's like the best we got. The remake delivered. It was by and far the most impressive thing I thought, was just like, Nojima clearly cared about these characters a lot and has been wanting to revisit this shit over the years. And it feels like in that game, and now this game especially, holy shit, dude, the characters are incredible.
Completely knocked it out of the park for me. Like the most minor characters, like a lot of, like one of my brother-in-law, he had no idea that Jessie was a female. He thought it was a dude. Like he didn't really get that. So like when he was playing the remake, because he played it a couple months after I had already gone through it and I started making content on it, just seeing it from like his lens, like, and seeing him, because he's not really deep into like the lore of FF7, he loves it, so seeing him just get sucked into it in that way, blow his mind collectively, it was really cool to witness it from that perspective and just go like, oh, okay, yeah, devs really sat on this, they were cooking, and they knew exactly what they wanted to hit in terms of expanding the characters and other elements within the beginning of the story that we all know and love.
You know, one thing that really kind of impressed me about Rebirth in a way that Remake didn't, when you look at maybe the past decade and a half of Square Enix games, they've all had a very corridor structure to them, with the exception of Final Fantasy 15. And Final Fantasy 15 came out, open world game, but it also left people wanting with it. And it kind of left this impression that maybe Square Enix can't do these big open world type of games, right? Because 15 felt empty in a lot of ways. There was a lot of copy and pasted content. I mean, quite literally, the gas stations in 15 were not unique assets. They were literally pasted across the whole world. And so there was this impression after 15 that Square's not capable of doing the type of RPGs that we're seeing other companies do, where it's massive worlds, plenty of things to do, lots of side quests, and boy, did they prove everyone wrong with Rebirth. And I remember, you know, kind of stepping out onto the grasslands. I'm like, okay, this game is big, but how much bigger can it get? And then it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a mini game now. And this is a mini game. And the game had all these different ways to interact with it as well, in a way that, again, like the past like decade and a half of Square Enix games haven't really had. Like I was blown away. I was like, Square made this? Just because it's so different from their current games. Yeah.
I had a very similar feeling about it playing through, because going from like Remake into Rebirth, I was super fixated on the story because I'd been talking about it like in a, you know, theory crafting way for so long. I was like, how is this all going to pan out? Like, how much bigger is the story going to be? Am I not necessarily thinking wrong or right, but just like, what are they going to do? And then I started playing the game, and it just kept opening up with the combat. It started opening up the quests, and then it just kept opening up to a point. I think it was like Genova Emergent when the song hits in that battle, where I was like, this is not gonna stop. Is it? It's just gonna keep expanding out. Like, they're pushing it on the music, they're pushing it on the combat, and then the character interactions, going back to like what you were saying, Max, is that it felt like all of that sort of compilation, like, even though the story for Rebirth gets nuts, but it just all seemingly connects back to the characters. So that was kind of what resonated me about playing with it, was the combat, and just characters were awesome. Like, and all of it was super cool.
I feel like I was in the same boat as you, where it's like, man, let's just give us some confirmation on what the hell's going on. The first 5 minutes is like a massive info dump of what in the hell. And then it's like 36 hours later, you see Zack get up out of the chair. Yeah. I'm like, come on, give me a break here.
Yeah, why do we keep cutting back here? That's awful.
And so I was at the preview events too, and I remember going from like getting this look at the Junon area and thinking, okay, this is pretty big, but you know, a bunch was walled off, and then and so I sort of thought, okay, it's maybe gonna be a little empty, like Final Fantasy 15, where there's big spaces and you can explore, but like the amount of stuff to do is going to you know, sort of funnel you towards story-driven moments. But the second preview event, which, by the way, they didn't show us the weird Zack intro, so that was a complete surprise when played the full game, but like the second preview when we're in calm, I was like, okay, I can't imagine how they're going to like really compel us to do any narrative stuff, because we had like 4 hours to play the grasslands and we could only get like a percentage done. Like none of us we were all scrambling to try and get stuff done, and I had like Hamaguchi squeezing my shoulder going, go to Midgarstormer, you're not going to do any of this shit. So like like that's how kind of expansive the game was. So where I got really impressed was when I had my hands on the full game, and then after like the kind of overwhelming feel of all of the side stuff settles, it's amazing how much narrative there still is and how easily they balance that open world checklist of stuff to do with really good quality of life stuff, and fast travel and all that stuff to make it really happen quickly and cohesively with the big key narrative strokes. And I don't think I can think of a single open world experience that really does it quite like Rebirth does, and that includes some of like the big open world games, which all have their own strengths. But like I was really surprised at all the times that we would go between continents and we would get these really amazing moments that kind of push the story forward.
I'm glad you mentioned the first playable, the September playable, which was portion of Junon, because even that like gave you little bits of everything, right? Here's a chocobo stop, you can't do much with it, but here's like swimming and here's traversal, and then obviously your main path. And we were like, I remember going back to the mindset of that demo being like, oh, this is cool, right? If this is our Junon area and it's like a little bit bigger, maybe it's like twice as big, like there's another little section, that's still massive. I spent like 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes exploring this. There clearly can't be any more. And it's like, dude, that shit was like 1/15 of that area. It's like, holy God, we were not ready. And I don't think we had an idea of how unready we were until like that Junon area opens up and it's like, why is it still going? Why are there pirate ships? What is going on? There's a complete other town. The game just kept doing that throughout the entirety of the playthrough, it felt like.
Yeah, I had a
in a way
chance
that we haven't seen since like the PS1 days.
Yeah,
I had a chance to play that same Junon demo in Vegas. It was like a month after you guys had already played it. I'm over here like trying to there's that little space that you can't cross through and it says like you can't access this in the demo here. I'm over here like the Square Enix devs are watching me and I'm just like trying to like dive into it in certain angles and like see if I could clip through it or whatever, and they're laughing. They're like, yo, you have no idea how many people have tried that. We just keep seeing it every single like demo.
People want more. That was the idea, is that people like were like frothing to just get more of what the world had to offer. And again, we had no idea how big it was actually going to be.
I generally know like what Max, Babyseal, and NightSkyPrince feel like with the ending of the game. Sleepezi recently finished it like last week. What could you highlight the key moment, I guess, or key moments in general of like what stood out for you the most in the game? Whether it be like new directions that they decided to take, or redoing an element that they had in the original game that you didn't expect for them to take it in this one.
I love the ending of the game. I'm just gonna get that out of the way like right away. Is that not for a moment was I knew generally that everyone had like their say of like Aerith lives, Aerith dies, like what's gonna happen at the end of this, but none of the ways that people had described any of those things playing out really felt like Final Fantasy VII, or like that was the right direction to take, or the sure direction to take. But as soon as like Aerith gets like actually stabbed after the VCR cut of the sword and the blood coming out, I was just like, this is the only way they could have done this and have me be feeling satisfied, because then you realize, oh my God, this is all about Cloud dealing with this, and this is just setting up for part 3 dealing with all of this horrible regret that of like what happened here. And that's a big thing that happens in Advent Children is that he's just like, why couldn't I save Zack or Aerith? So I thought not only was it satisfying, but I also was like, this is the most Final Fantasy VII thing that they could have done, because they put all of that emphasis on it being about Cloud figuring out who he is later, like, and making an iconic scene that we all like everyone's about part 3 because everyone had like parts of part 2 that they wanted to see. Part 3 is all about the live stream sequence, like that payoff. And now there you have it. You have all of this more interesting stuff being injected into like an already iconic scene. So I loved it. I loved the way that they tied that all together.
For me, the ending felt like it was the most similar to the 1997 reaction to Final Fantasy VII, and I'm kind of aging myself a little bit, but it took a couple of years for people to like consider the ending of that game to be a sublime masterpiece. People thought FF7 was unbelievable, it was genre defining, it was incredible, but one, most people didn't finish it and they just thought it was good. So two, a lot of people were complaining about the ambiguity of the ending for a good 2 or 3 years.
Oh yeah.
And Remake had a little bit of that, plenty of that actually, but this feels even more like that, where we're looking at a 90 plus Metacritic score, but everybody's like, but that ending though, like this feels like being back in 1997. And one of the things TheNightSkyPrince says all the time is that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth feels like the real remake for Final Fantasy VII. And I liked FF7R, probably more than the average bear, but still, I agree with that kind of feeling that, this is a ending that I think will age really well, regardless of what happens in Part 3. Even if Part 3 totally, Game of Thrones it, like, I think it's really got a good shot of aging really well and being seen as kind of this sublime exploration of grief, etc. I also did recognize when I played it, because again, it was one of those things where I was totally alone, because I played like an early review copy and I no life to it, thinking, oh my god, only me and Sleepezi are gonna like this ending. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
I started using the comparison as I was revisiting this stuff and thinking it over time. And this isn't even my perspective as much as the overall general perspective from a lot of people, because dude, I feel like the reception on this ending is everywhere. This isn't divisive. This isn't polarizing. It's everywhere. Like, you can be in so many different spots, from like the number 1 all the way till 10 of like full acceptance to like full this is ass balls, this sucks, right? But to me, I use the comparison of the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, or at least not The Hobbit, like the original Lord of the Rings, where you're obviously interpreting something and expanding it in a way for like a different medium, because the medium of games now is quite different than the medium of games it was in 1997. Mm-hmm. So where we're at right now is the end of Two Towers. So it's like coming to conclusions as far as where the story is is going, or how it's going to conclude in Return of the King, like Oscar winning, potentially best of the entire trilogy, like Return of the King. I feel like that's where we're at right now. And it can be fumbled because we don't know. And the hardest part is that those movies had a year in between.
Right.
We got like 3 to 4, dude. So we really got to sit on this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the kind of issues that I saw potentially happening at the end of Remake was that I was like, well, now it kind of feels like if they kill her, I saw it coming. If they don't kill her, I also saw it coming.
No winning.
So yeah. So I'm like, the only way they can really surprise me is if they come up with a third secret thing.
Yeah. If they surprise me.
Yeah. If they actually surprise you. Yeah.
Right, that is neither just her dying or her staying alive, but this whole sort of ambiguity of what actually is happening with Aerith. And I think they've created a ton of intrigue with that, because I feel like in a million years, us imagining, back in the day when we saw like the PS3 tech demo and everyone's speculating, oh, what's Aerith's death gonna look like? I did not imagine it looking like fucking that.
Yeah.
With confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yo, they went really, really hard with it. And it's like, when I think about like the key moments for me with this game, how do they keep making it get better every single chapter, every single thing that we're doing, going through different parts of the world? And especially when I got to like chapter 9, like I love the ending. I love the way that they did it, and like the fact that it's so confusing in all the best ways.
Remind us, what was 9 again?
That was Gangaga's chapter.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that chapter was just, I was not expecting it to hit that hard because of how small like Gongaga was in the original game. You could totally miss it.
Massively expanded.
With the way that they handled the music, the way they did the pacing. I remember like losing my shit like on stream just playing this, and I'm just like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe this is about to be the most interesting chapter. And I loved everything that I played up until then, and it just kept on, for some reason, getting better and better. It's like they full on went ahead, expanded the game in so many other ways that I never thought would be possible.
I got to give shout outs to Gongaga as an area, largely considered to be the worst area of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth by many accounts. And I kind of liked it that I didn't know exactly where to go, and I had to use my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
It falls into the whole yellow paint ideology, where it's like, yeah, yellow paint's going to guide you everywhere you need to go. And then suddenly you get a zone that doesn't have yellow paint everywhere, and everyone's like, I hate this. I can't stand it. I don't know where to go. I have to think about it for more than 30 seconds. I don't like it. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. It's also the same too with quest markers, right? Everyone will be like, oh, it's a checklist. You have to go here and go do that. But then everyone complains also too when they're not there.
Yep,
I
exactly.
was playing with a desaturated monitor when I was going through the Mithril mines, and you know how horrible it was.
Can't see shit.
Going where anything. I know exactly. I was literally looking. I was in there for 15 minutes, literally looking for the yellow markers until I realized. So they're useful, guys.
I went back recently on hard mode, and I'm running through it. I'm like, chat, I promise you, it did not look like this when I first came here, because I ended up going and walking by it and then going all the way back to the beginning and having to retrace my steps. That change was so drastic.
Let me gush a little bit since we're talking about like zones and areas and stuff. Just talking about dungeons, which are probably the weakest part of part one of remake part one. They are just aggressive hallways. This one was like, all right, let's do something to, number one, all the dungeons in this game are story expansive. So we're either combining characters with one another and putting weird team duos with other characters so that they can like expand with them. So you have another character to react to how that character is evolving in some way, which is great. It's kind of hard if you just have a character going through a trial of some kind or some super emotional thing, and there's no one there to like witness what it is, so you can see their reaction of like, oh, Red 13's going through some shit right now, you know, and you get the Barrett side of it. Yeah. But they also do like gameplay stuff every single time. Like every dungeon, at the behest of the Kate Sith one, every single dungeon gives you like some new gimmick / gameplay thing for that character, which is like, oh yeah, this is nice. This was something that I played Guardians of the Galaxy a few years ago, and I really dug about it, where it's like, oh, you can use the team to solve dungeon puzzles because Drax throws thing and then Gamora jumps up and Peter does something. But yeah, I was like, this is cool. This is some way to actually make each dungeon feel relatively unique and different, and I think they did a super good job with that, albeit let's reinvent aiming for the Kate Sith dungeon for some reason. So that's the only one that kind of like was like, huh, I'm not looking forward to coming back here.
May have been the low point.
I was so looking forward to Dirge of Cerberus 2 segment, and that completely disappointed.
yeah. What is Vincent gonna shoot in the next game or something like that in his unique dungeon, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
and I think too that like, you know, contemporary Final Fantasy games, again, this is an issue with like 15, the first 7 remake, and even 16 really, is that, you know, light puzzle solving really does help change up the gameplay pacing, and like being able to play as the different characters and interact with the environment in the different ways in which they uniquely can really allowed the gameplay to keep flowing and kept me engaged with it even during long stretches of playtimes. Whereas I feel like a problem that Square has had with like a lot of their recent games is that the only way you can actually interact with the game is combat. And so they have to just keep throwing enemies at you. And, you know, that's not the only way that I want to interact with an RPG, especially an RPG. I want to be able to do other different things. And that's what Final Fantasy VII's strong suit, it's always been, really.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Like it seems like they realized that during development after part 1, and they're like, all right, so how do we want people to actually engage this video game outside of just beating shit up? And they had no limiters, apparently. There was no limitations on brain power or possibilities or budget. They just went full force on everything. It's like almost to a degree, maybe too much, to the point where it starts to turn off some people that there's too much variety, you know?
I was high-key addicted. Every new zone, every region I went to, checklisting all of like the world intel and all the little interactable elements within it, whether it was a mini game or like an actual world event. It was so much of a priority with every new zone that I go to that I knock everything out before I continue with the story. And no matter how like much I really want to know what the hell is going to happen next, I could not progress further until I got that world boss intel, whether it's like the Jabberwocky or like the Marlboro or whatever. They did such a really, like, for something about that like clicked with me, where I just felt like it didn't feel like a checklist, and I knew I described it as that before, but it just felt like more dope shit that I get to do and unlock cool things in between.
And you have no idea that like you're gonna do a proto relic quest and then see like Wedge get like pasted onto the sidewalk. Like around every corner is like crazy lore. Like it's insane how
I just
got
done with the Queen's. Oh, sorry.
Spoilers. Sorry if I spoiled. Wedge dies.
Wedge becomes the pizza.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh
Absolutely.
man.
But yeah, I mean, like even like Sleepezi, I was watching him do the Queen's Blood thing for a while, and we have a question later set up for the Queen's Blood stuff that we'll talk about. But Queen's Blood even ended up having like, it's just to Ryan's point, to TheNightSkyPrince's point, there's so many elements of the gameplay design that are really designed to keep you engaged, you know, and interactive environments, having a meaning to weird mini games, like a lore implication or something that develops characters. Like all of that stuff was really kept you like in this world. And even like I was kind of dreading like digging deep into some of the really obscure mini games. Every single mini game, even the frog one, has like some little clip at the end that like improves your relationship. And then like they, with the side quest structure, they would do things that would trick you into thinking, oh, this is gonna really suck, and then like right as it's about to get super painful, they would relieve it. It's like they took all of the feedback of all the side quest structures in all of the games previous to this, you know, including FF16, and we're like, how do we make this like in a laboratory, how do we make this just barely frustrate you and then pull you
arcade
into
style
more.
like an old arcade game. Like we just want to frustrate you a little bit to get you to continue to play. Like all the games felt very arcade-esque. I would argue the Gambit one maybe not so much, where it's like I need a strategy guide.
That one I was stuck on for a while, but I think we could all agree on like the chicken quest.
Chicken quest.
Okay. There's a firm belief that the chicken quest is the worst thing in the entire game. I will emphatically ask everybody here to put your hand up if you love the chicken quest.
Oh, I loved it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what's the reasoning? I love the chicken quest because it is hyper aware that it is a bullshit side quest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like the devs pay attention to that. The moment where you're sitting there and I'm like, dude, I'm 6,000 feet away from the target. Are you asking me to walk backwards to Midgar, you piece of shit chicken? And then as soon as you're about to do it, you see this huge monster show up, and I was laughing my ass off. I'm like, all right, they're not going to make me do that. Thank you, developers. I get it now. I understand it. Now we're going to eat this chicken.
It's so funny because, you know, with this game, we talk about meta commentaries a lot. That to me felt like the most meta commentary. Like the whole game.
Dude, the devs are speaking to me right now. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common complaints about Remake was the herding cat side quest, and they were so aware of that they gave you they amped that shit up to 11. Not only are you literally herding cats, but they're awesome. Like they're behind you. And then at the end, you have to play piano to them. Like it's like, we hear your complaint. We're gonna double down and prove you wrong. Herding cats is awesome.
Because there's multiple herding cat side quests in this game. There's one where you actually herd more cats, and it's done better. And there's also the Shinra guards, or everyone that you have to promote in Junon. It's the same. You're just herding a lot of cats now, and they say shit to you.
Yeah.
And each interaction in Junon was so great too, with like each soldier. Like I was looking forward to seeing what the next one would say and what the next one would say. This one made me take a photo of them, and I purposely took a really bad photo just to see.
This game has so much. I'd argue FF7 Rebirth has the most charm of any game I've ever played, and that's a weird sort of broad stroke term because there is so much of it. It's hard for me to like. You can take the bald bar moment. Right? Just that one moment. And in any other game, this moment could be the best part of that game. But in FF7 Rebirth, it's just one of 100 moments. So it's like that almost like glazes over your eyes by the time the game is finished, where it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about the fact that Vincent doesn't know how to use a phone or doesn't know how to use his device, so he has to get some Zoomer cat to come in and be like, no, this is how you use it. He's like, oh. Like, there's so many little things that are sprinkled throughout the game that it becomes almost too much to remember how much good shit there was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
I didn't know that there was a chicken game until you guys all just told me that there was a chicken game.
Seriously?
Dude, you
The
got
chicken
it.
side quest game?
You're gonna
Okay.
love it. You're gonna love it.
Was not like you guys in going through the game. I think you guys all 100%ed through the game. I think around the Gongaga, after Gongaga, I pretty much just went for main quest. So now I'm backtracking, figuring everything out like this. So I'll get there for sure.
It's one of the green quests. You'll either love it and or hate it.
Yeah.
I'll never forget NSP's reaction. In we have a group chat, and he was like, "Oh my god, I hate this fucking quest." And we're like, "Which quest are you on?" He's like, "The chicken quest." I was like, "Oh, what'd you think of the ending?" He's like, "Bro, I gave up when they said that I had to go this far. I turned off the game." And I was like, "No, please go back."
So I had to go back and do it later, and then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But at the time, I was just like, I'm not doing this. This is just more remake. And then sure enough, I came back to it. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
They got me.
They're gonna ask me to go to Midgard next. Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, more hallways for me. Okay, great.
Flawless. But so of course we got to talk about the gameplay, guys, and I will be the first to say that this gameplay, I had ideas going from remake on how they could make things better, and they went ahead and they did. Absolutely. I think the only thing gameplay wise that Rebirth is missing are loadouts, and I would like to see the background characters sort of be involved, kind of like kind of like Final Fantasy X. You know, Final Fantasy X, you could like swap characters out that are like not even on the field and just throw them in there.
It seems that's being saved. That I feel like I agree with you. That shit's being saved, is what it feels like.
Yeah, and I think I thought that when I think me and you talked about it a little bit at Summer Games Fest last year, but like when they showed the trailer, you see Tifa like standing way in the distance. She's not in the party. She's like standing next to like a tractor with her guard up, and I'm like, oh my god, are we gonna be able to swap her in?
Yeah, just seeing that they were there and not like gone, was a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely a testing thing. It's gonna get even wilder, especially like throwing in Sid and Vincent on top of that. Maybe a Force Ghost Aerith that only Cloud has synergy abilities.
On that same note, they kind of feel like they're introducing that a little bit at the end of this game, where you have Zack kind of synergized attacking with Cloud during his segment. I was thinking to myself, this would be the coolest way to sort of change out party members, like in the middle of battle, just have them introduced with a synergy attack, or like, not that it's going to happen, but maybe like you suggested, like a Ghost Aerith or something like that. If they're going to be a part of the game, that's one way that they could do it. So
I personally feel that in terms of like Aerith involvement in the next one, I think they are going to want us to experience that loss, because Aerith could or could not have been one of the most important party members in your party in the OG game, and then they rip that shit away from you. I think they're going to do that, where it's like either her synergy abilities, things, because she's goddamn godlike. Like, not even talking in terms of like character perspective, Omni Aerith, she's running Game Shark cheats, all strategy guides. She's OP as shit story-wise, but legit in this game, she's so powerful. Like, Radiant Ward, Arcane Ward are disgusting. She's not the most like jump right out the bat, start whacking things powerful, but as soon as you get like 2 wards set up, you just win. I'm like, dude, she's so good. It's disgusting. So it's like, I think we're just going to have to hold that. It'd be very weird if like Vincent showed up, Radiant Ward, Arcane Ward. Like,
Sid can double cast for no reason.
yeah, he just does it.
Yo, Yuffie has quadricast.
Yeah,
technically, right?
Technically, like when you combine that with Arcane Ward, that's insane, bro. Just
Yuffie's broken. I
remember saying like during the DLC, like nerfed. Yeah, I was saying during the DLC, how is this gonna work? Like, she's so vastly better than everybody else, like in the remake DLC, and then Rebirth comes out, and then Cloud is doing like the dopest shit ever, like teleporting in the air, and like aerial combat has just been like dramatically improved for everybody that can go in the air. And then seeing like Yuffie not only retain majority of the things that she had in her DLC that made her stupid, busted, and fun, They gave her more shit on top of that.
They gave her more shit and they redistributed her shit, right? Where it was like she had that explosion where she can just like nuke you if you did enough attacks. She had some sort of ability that like built up and then boom. They gave other characters that stuff now too. Like Aerith technically gets it if she builds up bar towards certain things.
Yes,
and
transcendence.
Yuffie gets it. Yeah, Yuffie gets it like a bit later now, so I can see what they did. They're like, all right, so this was way too powerful. As soon as you got this move, you just like eliminated enemy health. We're just gonna redistribute these abilities later on. Dude, FF7 Rebirth's combat is so wild that there's no way you're utilizing everything on a first playthrough.
Right.
Like, even at the end of the game, I still forget about synergy skills. And they're amazing.
Right.
Like, there's some of the
they fill
best
up your
shit in the game.
ATB so fast. Yeah.
Yeah, they legit make you like invincible to certain attacks and stuff with timing. They give you the ability to build a ton of ATB. I almost feel like this game's design philosophy, giving characters like the world, everything, and more, reminds me of like an old school fighting game. This is like the Marvel versus Capcom 2 of JRPGs, where it's like you're never gonna utilize all this stuff. We're going to put so much shit in here for you to come up with some wild, unique element that we're now seeing it. Like a month and a half later, people are taking on the hardest challenges in the game and doing things that are just like, what the hell? This is possible? It's like a fighting game combo video, dude. It's nuts to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played a lot of JRPGs and a lot of different games with different playable characters in general, but Rebirth is really one of the first games where I felt every single character is equally useful depending on how the player uses them. To the point of where I didn't even really know who I wanted in my party because I could see the value in every single character in such a deep way. And in like a lot of games too, I feel like I really have to sit down and kind of play with the character's kit before they become obvious to me about what the value of that character is. In Rebirth, in like 15 minutes of playing of these characters, I was like, oh, I completely understand. Like, this character does this character does that. And they also guide you through in such a clever way. It's kind of like why I love like them splitting the party up during those sections, is because a lot of people are not going to spend that much time playing as Kate Sith.
I was so on board with the idea that like right in the grasslands, I had Tifa and Aerith, and I was like, this is it. I'm not changing my party. This is the synergy that I need in my team. And then Mithril Mine shows up, and then Barrett and Red 13 segment. I was like, these characters are also broken. Like, what the fuck? And then every character after that, as they're introduced and as these segments play out, I just feel they're all broken and all way too fun to play. And it's magical, especially this is when I knew I was in trouble, is that playing Zack segment at the beginning and just having that aerial combo up. Yeah, I was like, there's too much shit to figure out. I'm already done. And then I'm literally at the end of the game, I'm like, thank God I'm playing Zack again, because now I want to mess around with all of his shit. Like, constantly unfolding combat in this game it's wild.
That's insane how they gave Zack such like interesting mechanics. They gave him a quick charge in between his like strikes. So like as you're mashing square, you can tap triangle to like go up an entire level instead of charging it.
They gave him though, so that's in fighting game that's called like just frame timing stuff, where at the end of doing certain attacks you can like buff yourself out, and there's a little window, and I couldn't even figure out the window. I won't lie, there are things near that require such specific timing. Who in here successfully did a full Trinity strike with Tifa?
Definitely not me. I haven't even tried it yet.
I got to 2. I can never get the third one to happen. I was like, what is the timing on this shit, dude? I cannot figure it out. So again, that's something I never got to do with certain characters because the timing is like kind of difficult. And by the time I got it, I just started doing other things because the fights are hard. So I was like, I don't want to waste my ATB on this anymore.
It's a shame because I think it might have some really cool properties hidden within it. And eventually, you never know, people on YouTube are going to figure it out. But that's definitely a move that I neglected. I unlocked it. I tried it a couple of times and I'm like, there's so many other, for me personally, I was like, there's so many other better moves. You just
stick to what works.
Yeah.
On the Tifa solo challenge, I probably did it once or twice, but I've seen on YouTube people just farming it. But you're right. I ended up having to let it go, for other builds, because you just use what works for you. But like everybody's saying, like, I'm astonished to see people playing the game 1,000,000% differently than me and still succeeding. Like, it's really unbelievable.
You'd be surprised at the majority of playthroughs you watch other people playing the game and guess what strategy they are using.
No, you tell us.
It's just mashing square.
Oh yeah.
It's just square mashing, and then eventually I have an ATB. I might do a move or use it on magic, and that's it.
Yeah. That's rough for platinum. Like, good luck.
Yeah. That's the thing. The game is so goddamn hard. Like, a lot of people really go in on this game's difficulty where they're just like, shit is too hard. And I admit, like, I was sort of welcoming that, where it's like, I want shit to be tough. I want this game to like force me to learn shit. And it's one of the reasons I love the Odin fight so much. My God, dude, I love the Odin fight is the equivalent of like an FF14 battle with like mechanics. So it's like, okay, so if you don't do this in the right way, you're just dead. Like, if you don't perform well, I'm just going to kill you.
Right. He gets bored.
He gets bored. He literally gets bored because you're not engaging the mechanics enough. I'm like, there's so much psycho meta stuff throughout this game that it's hilarious, dude. So I think I really enjoyed that about it. And as I'm going through hard mode and like doing bosses and stuff, dude, we don't want to get too much into like follow-up playthrough stuff, and I'm not even that far in. But goddamn, the rock golem in the Mithril Mines is so much fun on hard mode.
It's the best fight, dude.
It's so sick. Like, it really forces you to engage. Like, now synergy skills are important. Now we're gonna force you to use this stuff. You really got to pay attention to who's in your party.
Live in 4K, that shit whooped my ass so many times because I was so stubborn on not using the defensive ability for Red and Barret. I didn't have it for either of them, and my chat's like, trust me, unlock this. And I'm like, all right, sure, I'll go ahead and do it. And I did, and I was like, oh my God, we like one-shotted it right after. It was like, okay, yeah, this is what hard mode's gonna be like. We gotta really utilize all the synergy skills, abilities whenever they pop up. The combat with this game is so, like, it actually did like a life shift for me, because back in 2020, Mortal Kombat 11 videos were like getting demonetized like crazy, and I was making videos on that, Dragon Ball FighterZ and Smash, and with FF7, I was just like, oh, I love this game growing up. I can't wait to see, like, I wasn't so invested with the lead up to like remake. I was like, oh, I'll just make some videos on it. I'll maybe do like a let's play. And then when I started playing the game and it was like, holy shit, this is like a fighting game, I started to go ham with like guides and showing people like how to break certain things, how to do crazy stuff with Tifa, how, like, you know, a lot of people say like Barrett's not that fun to play as. And I'm like, bro, have you tried Melee Barret? That is the funnest shit ever.
They took that away from us in this game, which is almost a bummer, right?
Yeah. They did move what is it, Mad Rush or something like that. There's that move with Cloud and Barret, and it's kind of like his triangle charge move, but it doesn't feel the same.
It's like, I appreciate that about the combat system in this game, because I'd argue my experience with like a lot of RPGs is pretty minimal over the past like 20 years, but just in terms of combat in general, right, throughout a variety of action games and fighting games, it's the shit that I love. I felt like Remake had one of the best combat systems out there with some problems, but it was already so viscerally enjoyable and such a cool idea. Dude, you go into slow-mo to make your actions and choices. I'm like, there are some amazing ideas in here. It's the pinnacle, like, Nomurian aspect of the game, where it's like, oh yeah, combat in all of his games are fucking sick, and it's gonna look really sick. He was literally like the combat guy in the OG FF7. So I was more like, so where can they take this? There's obviously things that they can do with it. I was not expecting the kitchen sink, right? Because they kitchen synced this one to a point where I don't know how you expand upon this. Like, and then the follow-up games, like what we get in the next game, I don't know where you go from this point forward, because there's already so much here.
Right. I think that one point, and you mentioned this, and I had a lot of the same ideas too, was like the Black Materia almost being like a symbiote suit, and where they go with that. So I think Black Materia abilities, I think what BltzZ mentioned with swapping party members out in the middle of battle in the way you do in Final Fantasy X, I think that's how you really elevate this battle system. But I know one thing for sure is that I really want to see Square continue to use this type of battle system even beyond, you know, Part 3. Because I feel like,
absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like this battle system is their own unique genre of action RPG. And I can only think of one other company that owns like their own genre of action RPG, and that's FromSoft, right? Yeah. And now we have other Soulsborne games that take inspiration from those. And I think this is the only game with combat like this. And I think that Square should continue to build on it, even outside of the third part.
It's funny you mentioned that, NSP, because that I don't think any other game I've ever played and the impressions of it are like first 2 weeks FF7 Rebirth, where the amount of people that were like, okay, so let's just do what Rebirth does with its world and gameplay and put it in Chrono Trigger. Let's do that to Final Fantasy VI. Yeah. Let's do that to Final Fantasy VIII. Let's do that to 9. Like, people were like, I just want this. This is it. Let's do this with all the other games. Yeah. And everybody just kept saying that shit. It's like, whoa, dude, okay.
Right. And part of it is because whenever you switch to action, it feels like you're abandoning that strategic turn-based element, right? And this is a system where you can keep all the stuff you loved about turn-based battles. Mm-hmm. And you can have that visceral action combat and have the best of both worlds all in one place.
They struck gold with this, man. And I truly agree with you on that, man. Like, it's so valuable, I think, for them to really, like, because I know every Final Fantasy, a new system, new mechanics, and in general introducing something to the series, right? Like, obviously 7 does borrow the stagger system coming back from like 13, and even like 16 reuses stagger or whatnot. Like, reusing things are great, but I think that this specific system and the way that they have it all set up and the way everything plays out as far as like ATB building up goes, and if you want, you could use like synergy skills and force feed synergy abilities. And eventually, maybe for part 3, they could do triple text, which would be, I think that's like the direction that they would take it for sure.
Yeah. It seems like triple text and obviously like big party usage, you know, like utilizing and hot swapping in and out. I don't know if I have a funny feeling that we're not going to get that for the entirety of the game, because to me, there's a scale of battle that is going to happen in the following game, especially with weapons and massive fights, that I don't know if the current battle system fits towards, that we might need something even bigger. We might need to actually do something where it's like, oh, so it isn't just a party of 3 hot swap everybody in and out. It feels like if you're going to be fighting the diamond weapon, it should be like all, 8 or 9 characters. And you just have to like find a way to engage this monster all at the same time, a la like Advent Children shit, when they're all fighting. Like, I feel like they want to recreate that moment in some way, and it's just setting that up for the next game.
Advent Children is the gift that keeps giving.
Sorta, yeah. I think Bizarro Sephiroth and Arbiter of Fate are kind of examples of that, where it's like, okay, each party's like fighting on a platform, much less the last form of Genova, you know, sort of like that. And it leads me a hope that there's one problem with this game, and there's one problem with the OG Final Fantasy VII. It's hot swapping party members and loadouts. Yeah. And there's like just a constant issue in the old game and this game where it's just like, I'm not used to this character, much less do they have all the stuff they need. I think the game is going to need to give us like enough materia and essentially shit to put on every character, so that no, this isn't about your main party now it's about everybody. And how do we alleviate that process to make that easier on the player? Because clearly, like, I have to babysit like 7 fucking characters. I don't want to have to do that. That's going to have to be like an interesting challenge for the next game.
The check I'm wondering if they can cash is they made Galleon Beast gigantic. How is Vincent gonna summon stuff? Also, how are they gonna do Knights of the Round? I'm so curious.
So, that's a good question. The next game doesn't have that many summons left. There's like 3 or 4 that they have not utilized. Do you think we go like full out Final Fantasy 16 controllable summon moments?
Well, the thing about FF16, and there was an interview with Kuji Raoka, who's the director of the icon fights there, and he was saying that, you know, they kind of had to spend an insane amount of money in order to get those icon fights there. And honestly, like, when you look at that game, you can kind of tell like where the budget was distributed in a very clear way. And so I don't even know if doing like full icon versus icon fights is possible.
Yeah, I mean, like
this game would do, but
in a, like, let's say summon knights, right? And then you control Arthur with all the other knights around, or whoever the heck the main knight is called, right? Yeah. And effectively the party's gone, where it's such a powerful summon that you just get to control like unique move set for that one specifically, where that could be like a different way of engaging summons other than them just sort of like showing up, you know, in moments of need as the game explodes, and then you use ATB on them. Like, maybe like there's you'd like to think that are we going to get like 15 summons in the next game? We already get so many here. It's like, what are they going to do about that?
I mean, if they do, it'd be the best game of all time.
Knights of the Round would cost like 6 ATB from every single character. You got to expend all your resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be more than just a cutscene. And I know that's like the easiest way that they could take it because of how powerful the summon in general is. But I would really love it to be a playable aspect. And I hope that that's something that they could figure out. I mean, Hamaguchi's talking about that. Like, he was cooking the other day. He was talking like how, yeah, he knows like fans are like really excited about Knights of the Round. And this is like a really big deal. So it's a big task for them, but they're working on stuff. So what they end up doing, I have no idea, dude. But like, there's so many different angles at which that they could like tackle.
Yeah, well, just them addressing it was like, yeah, and you nailed it. Story. Yeah. Like, make it part of the story. The Knights of the Round is already such a bizarre like thing in OG FF7. It's like, wait a minute, why is suddenly King Arthur around with his, future knights? What is this? Make that, and it already feels like we're sort of getting that, like Queen's Blood story sort of like filters in, and the City of the Ancients, and the Cetra talking about the humans and the knights fighting them, but they're manipulated by Genova or some crazy shit. It's like, there's something here where we use these, ethereal knights to protect us or some shit. It's like, all right, there's one thing that I would be happy with is that you make Knights of the Round an actual part of the story, and it's like a weapon to fight against Genova or some shit.
Oh, yeah. That would be crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it could be something as simple as like a proto relic, like something on the side. I feel like it would have to be integrated.
I almost hope
it
is
each of the 12 knights. Yeah.
Yeah. If it was a proto relic, that would be the best way to do it, where it's like, the splintered pieces, and you have to like fill out their story throughout. But I almost hope that they just like, you don't make it optional. Maybe I think they'll make chocobo breeding actually a thing that you have to do, gold chocoboing, all that kind of stuff. It feels like those elements are, to me, like almost like necessary for a part 3, but who knows? Like, this game already had a shit ton of like content that you could miss, and clearly told a lot of story stuff that would have been important to include in the main lore, but hey, screw it. We'll just move forward.
Yeah.
You see Gilgamesh come back and steal Excalibur. When he said that, I was like, wait, what? And then the anime stance that he made all the characters like stand in and stare at him.
I mean, thinking about Knights of the Round and thinking about 12 different models, textures, animations, gameplay balancing, coming up with the way that all 12 of those are going to interact. If you really go into game designer brain, Knights of the Round almost has to be the hugest fucking deal, because it is going to cost so much money and so much dev time that it has to almost like be a thing, like a huge plot point in which the game revolves around. So I would be very surprised if Knights of the Round was like side content.
Yeah.
For whatever they call part 3.
You almost feel bad for like Supernova when they eventually have to get to that, where it's like, man, like 100 people got to work on this thing. It's going to cost them so many millions of dollars, and we're just waiting for Sephiroth to do it to us once.
Yeah. to piss the player off, no less, as well. So that's a lot. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm anxiously waiting for him to turn me into a frog in the final battle because I forgot to put a ribbon on.
Yeah. Shit.
Part 3 in general, it has so much kind of like loaded on it, right? We have the weapon fights, we have Vincent and Sid becoming playable, we have all this other plot threads to wrap up. We have the stuff going on with Zack, right? We have the other worlds plot threads to wrap up. We have whatever's going on with
snowboarding, mini games,
ton of new mini games. Wu-Tai, the third game is going to really be insane. High Wind. Right.
Yes. And, well, not even just so High Wind, like Aerial Tiny Bronco, High Wind 1, and then High Wind 2. When like the High Wind opens up and gets jets and shit, it's like that's gonna happen at some point after. That's the Mosey moment, right, where everyone's ready to whoop ass. So, it feels like it's a good thing you guys got all these systems and shit figured out from the second game, because holy crap, dude, game 3 is just like the most content I can possibly imagine.
Could you imagine they throw on top of that, like how in Tears of the Kingdom they have like the over Sky World, and then you have the Hyrule map, and then the Under Depths, which is a whole entire like big area. Do you think that they take that direction with the submarine portions?
Absolutely. I don't think we're gonna get as like running around type shit, but I think in the same way that we're gonna have like flight and traversing in that specific way, I think they'll give us like things to do. I think there will be elements to engage with in the sky outside of just going from point A to point B, in the same way that you can find crashed ships, Galnikas, like all this type of stuff under the ocean. I think we're all expecting that, right?
There's so many like things that we could talk about as far as like part 3 goes. It doesn't even feel real. Doesn't even feel like this is an actual thing that's going to be happening. And then my confidence is at an all-time high because, like I said, going into like Rebirth, I didn't have like my expectations insanely high just in case. But like seeing what they were able to install and do as far as like gameplay, story, and world traversing, I am completely sold on whatever direction it is that they decide to take for part 3, because I think they are aware of the stakes and how crazy big they made Rebirth already, that 3 has to just add on to that even more in all the best ways. I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into the ending, because we did get a really nice chunk of like gameplay and mechanic stuff. So, and I kind of want to hear from Sleepezi first, because I'm so into like, you know, what you did, what you take away from this as far as like beating it recently. What did you feel about the implications for the way that the story ends and how much more dire things get in part 3?
We're in trouble. we're in
That's for sure.
We're in so much trouble, dude. I was nervous because I had a little bit of some pre not any spoilers, but people being like, oh man, the music in the chapter 14 section is just not what it should be. And I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of going into that section listening to the music, and via Cloud falling through whatever time, worlds, whatever that mesh is, into the Sleeping Forest section, and then Who Am I started playing. And I was like, why did we just experience all of this, you know, really spiritual out there shit, and they're playing a song that's so personal to like Cloud's identity? I was like, okay, well, that's strange. Going on, they play The Promised Land from Advent Children. And then as far as like the implications of like Aerith, I was just like, I'm not exactly sure what to take away from it yet, other than the fact that it feels like there's so many other elements at play as to like, I feel like it's the Sephiroth question from Remake right now, because everyone's like, it's Genova like influencing Cloud's mind, which is why he's like out of it at the end. I feel like it's a bunch of different Aeriths, like Sephiroth. How many Sephiroths are there? Now it feels like there's 5 different Aeriths. Is this Genova Aerith? Is this
Omni Aerith?
Omni Aerith? Right.
Is it Livestream Aerith? Yeah.
So many questions, yeah. But as the only thing that I really took away from it is that, and the way that the game made me feel at the end, was they wanted you to feel they'd been building up this idea of just fragments of worlds, and Cloud as a character is fragmented. And at the end, he is the most fragmented that he could possibly have been. And now we're playing literally just a broken Cloud, and everyone's like, you got this, man, and he's somewhere else mentally.
And he has the one ring.
Yes, and he has the one ring, which was just a trip. Aerith's holy materia being gone is very like telling to me, because in my mind it just feels like Aerith is kind of holy. And so the fact that it's not in there, the sort of materia itself, it's very troubling.
Quick question for you, Sleep. And anybody else, do we get the impression that Aerith's materia, what is seemingly holy and like the thing that came from her mother, but the way it seems to be described in this game doesn't make it seem like it's just fulfilling the same role? It makes it seem like this materia is aware that shit doesn't work. In fact, it makes things worse when it eventually gets used at the end of FF7. It causes like crazy tornadoes and shit. So it has like the opposite, as maybe there's some interpretation there, but it has like the opposite effect of it like screwing shit up, and Aerith has to literally show up and help out. It feels like the black materia and Aerith's materia are way more important. Like they have a much deeper role, and the same thing that Sephiroth is using it for, which is like, I'm using the black materia to like reunion the worlds and shit. It doesn't just summon common anymore. At least it feels that way.
Definitely feels like something that was a big takeaway from like Remake, especially with some perspective now on Rebirth, is that Aerith said about the holy materia is like, oh, it used to be colorful in the middle. Now it's not. And when I look back on remake and at the end of the highway, it looks like she's using that magic there. So whatever that is a completely different function to what we understand it to be in the OG, completely transformative. But then you have, I don't know, like Zack saying like, oh, that white wind was you, like you saved me. And then it's just like, okay, so is holy like just the white whispers, like a blanket term for just Aerith's presence? But it also feels like that for Sephiroth a little bit too, because of how he deals with the materia to begin with. The black materia, when it comes into being, is he just puts something inside of it, drops it, and then is like, here you go, Cloud, this is for me to give back to you. It's all more related to the characters than it is these bigger functions, or if there is that function, it's way more connected to Sephiroth and Aerith than it ever was before.
Yeah, and I feel like we obviously have like the Sephiroth materia, which is the black materia. He's like connected to it in some way now more than ever before. You have the Aerith materia, and then Aerith literally gives Cloud his materia, but it's empty because he's empty, like personality-wise, character-wise at the end of the game.
That empty materia is like the biggest question for me, because I think it is going to play like the biggest role. Maybe even like come into play in a bigger way than either the white or black materia, which might be my out there theory. But I feel like that's going to be filled with a new essence. And I think the prime time to fill that empty materia with a new essence is after the live stream sequence.
Yes. I'm with you, NSB, 100%. Because I think this is a good chance for us to get into like what the hell is or what happens to the blank materia, right? What happens to the empty materia that Aerith gives Cloud?
Right.
I'm sort of the mind. I do know that in Japanese, for instance, the scene where Aerith is describing to Red 13 what happened to it, it's a little bit more vague, whereas the English says the whispers must have taken it. But really, I think what happened is that the essence of the materia was transferred into the world within, the worlds within the planet, aka the live stream, at the end of remake. I think that's what happens. So it became empty after that happened. And then I think what happens is we get that essence, which was put into the worlds, inside the interlude world, during the interlude. And when Aerith hands Cloud, or when Cloud hands Aerith in the Sleeping Forest, the white materia, she puts it in her hair, the rainbow effect comes off of it, and then she hands it back empty. During that sequence, the Sleeping Forest looks different. It's very clearly not reflective of reality. It's ethereal and ephemeral and dreamlike. So I think we're just watching, the materia is just live stream. And this is all happening in the live stream. So I think we've never seen more than one physical shell that the white materia exists in. And it's just the essence that's being passed through. However, to your bigger point, it seems really clear to me that the meaning of both of these materia has been expanded tremendously in the re-trilogy. We got the Gi tribe lore, for the black materia. It's referred to as the purest materia in the soundtrack. And I think that everything we're seeing from quote-unquote Omni Aerith is the function of Holy. It's the function of the white materia. It's why, the rainbow effect is often surrounding the white light. And when Aerith shows up in the Sephiroth battle, it's this big white portal and she pops through. So I think it's really what the holy materia has done. Like, this is just my takeaway. What the holy materia has done is it's empowered livestream Aerith to become Omni Aerith. So that she can compete in this chess game.
And that makes sense. They say that like materia's the memories, like it's hopes and dreams. It's like, this is effectively reflective of Aerith with all those experiences in the live stream after the events of OG FF7 in literally Advent Children trying to help out Cloud and stuff like that. she probably has the information, all the cell phone numbers that she has at the end of Advent Children that she has to call people to tell them to come to the church. I don't know if you guys remember that happening, but Aerith literally gives everybody a cell phone call to show up and heal their space cancer at the church. So it's like, yeah, like this is ultimately representative of like the characters having way more information than what initially was presumed, right? Not just a holy materia, not just a meteor black materia. There's more to it now.
I definitely think that, especially when we start talking about this stuff, people are like, well, this is a complete departure from my favorite game, and it feels like very alienating. But I also want to say that, and to you, all of your guys' points, at the end of the original game, when we're fighting Sephiroth inside the heart of the planet, there's a line about this exact thing where Cloud realizes that the holy that is trapped is essentially like Aerith's hopes and dreams, or her, like, that's what's in there. So that's what they're fighting to defend. So it all kind of connects back to this, some very looser concepts, I think, to what they were not originally going for in the original game, but something like that. So
there's a and speaking to the degree of like, so now we understand how materia works and like what the live stream is. They're trying to really expand like live stream logic, right, in this game more than almost like ever before. So I look at that image at the end of the game, and Cloud is like obsessed with it. Like at the very end of the game, he's just looking at this blank thing, just contemplating, what does this mean? I can't even, I have 2 girlfriends now. I am so busy, but what does this mean? Like, he's so messed up that he can't possibly fathom what the hell's happening. I sent a picture of it to BltzZ earlier, and it's like, I had a moment when I was looking at this where he flips it. He like sees himself in it, and then he flips it. And I was literally playing bubbles with my daughter. I'm not kidding you. We were blowing big bubbles, and I looked at it, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's the same way that the material looks at the end of the game. It's a reflective world where if you ever look at a bubble from any angle at any side, you're going to see the top and then the bottom because it's just reflecting halfway through the bubble. So I'm like, that's interesting. But Cloud turns it and, it goes from a normal reflection to a bubble reflection.
I'm going to pull it up on screen.
Yeah, I feel like that is a direct storytelling thing where it's like Cloud looks at this thing that is essentially him inside it, like this empty dude, literally, with empty materia. And then he sees it on the opposite end when it turns, and it's like almost a reference of like his awareness / perspective of being split between these worlds, where it's like, oh, it's still him there. He's vague and obviously, not all there yet. But there's like an upside down world and another one where it's like, yeah, maybe he has obviously the perception, which could be why he's seeing some crazy bullshit in the sky. There's something going on there. I truly think this is Cloud's materia, is what I'm trying to get at. I think this is eventually going to be filled, like Sleep was saying, with Cloud's hopes, dreams, and memories, which he doesn't have right now. They're all fragmented and fucked up. But when they're made whole again, I think this shit starts glowing. I ultimately think this is leading towards the actual elimination of Sephiroth. Because as we know, Sephiroth doesn't die. Like, he continues through mimetic legacy, through genes. He exists in the live stream after OG FF7. He tells us all this shit in Advent Children that he's, I'm never going to be a memory. I'm just around. And it's like, well, there's no way to fucking kill you, right? You like can't die. So I think that's what this is used for. I think overall the story of Remake and Rebirth and whatever the next game is trying to give us a finality to the Sephiroth bad guy story. Where let's like sort of fix the issue that Cloud goes through like absolute emotional hell in Advent Children. I don't think we want to lead up to that again. I don't think Aerith would want that for Cloud either. Let's just set this dude up to be mad depressed for like the rest of his life. I'm like, no, let's fix this guy here, As soon as they introduced like multiple worlds, multiple like universes in that sense, my mind immediately went to like multiple holy materias, multiple black materias. Now, sure,
we haven't seen anything really in regards to like, I guess, multiple black materials, but they're full on showing us like the multiple holy, and I thought that was a really cool detail, because I always thought like at the end of Remake, when Aerith purified the portal at the end of the highway, that she didn't intend to, but it somewhat used, I guess, the holy materia or like some essence of it in that way, which is, we have no concrete answer on what the hell happened over there.
Yeah.
And, like,
have to go back and see. Do we see multiple holy materias at one given time, or does it feel like it's transferred?
It's more like transferred. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's kind of a cool storytelling thing where there's technically only ever one holy materia and one black materia. It seems it kind of seems that way by the end.
Yeah, and we have a question coming up that might allow us to break this apart.
Oh yeah, true. Schrodingersbabyseal does have some questions for us, so I will pass the microphone over to him so he can go ahead with that.
Let's go.
Yeah, so these are just some lore leading questions, and I think they're kind of like they're going to get to the crux of it. This is how we're going to solve part 3. So, devs, pay attention, and whatever you make Afterbirth into, just, take notes. Okay, so one of the things is so we got the Ultimania out. So Ultimania really just kind of, I think, confirmed what a lot of people thought, whatever that is. But there were some like fun details, and so I wanted to bring some of those up. One is that the Ultimania did very strongly confirm a connection between Queen's Blood and the struggle between Genova and the Cetra.
I feel like we were getting a hold of that a little bit as we were playing, but it's like, I don't have enough brain power to figure this out right now.
Exactly, and I felt the same way. And so it suggests that the Shadow Blood Queen is Genova, just straight up. And if you look at the mural in the Temple of the Ancients, you can see this representation of what looks like the Shadow Blood Queen coming out of Genova. Weirdly, too, it also looks like one of the Cetra on Aerith's mural, but we'll get into that later. And so the re-trilogy seems to really amplify the direct effect that Sephiroth and Genova are having on the world. So, like, we're seeing Sephiroth emulating Glenn and starting the War of the Beasts between Wutai and everything. How do we see this playing out in part 3? And maybe I'll pass it to TheNightSkyPrince first.
So a lot of the stuff that you mentioned there was really interesting too. I think that, one of the things that we kind of talked about before stream too was Young and Yogakara and those types of concepts too. And there's one particular thing that Chatley says. I know you're a big fan of this scene, Clark. I know you're a big fan of this scene. But there's a scene when you do all the VR missions at Chatley at the end where he talks about Cloud's limitless potential, right? I think that, everyone has been really focused on Sephiroth and Genova and Aerith. I think that Cloud is actually going to be the actual real key to this mystery in a way that I think that a lot of people are not even thinking about, that like isn't even on their radar. And I think that the kind of blank materia is set up for that. And so I think the reason that Sephiroth and Genova also need Cloud is because of whatever the actuality of Cloud's limitless potential is, right?
Oh, dang. He's like saying he's like Luke Skywalker's shit. The Emperor, we need him. Ooh, okay, that's kind of fucking cool.
Yes, sir. And so, like, kind of like looking into Yogakara and obviously Young, if you've ever played any JRPG ever, the Jungian Shadow is like a huge deal. If you play Persona, it's in there. Pretty much all of them, and especially in Final Fantasy VII. And with Nojima talking about that, and Yogakara kind of having like the concept of, kind of like the world being an illusion. Clark, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this.
We have a question coming up on it.
You're like the literal expert on this stuff. Did I mess up the thing?
Whatever.
Anyway, but like the power to kind of like create reality, right? Or realizing that reality itself is kind of like an illusion, which kind of allows you to basically create your reality. I feel like that in itself and that concept is really manifested in the live stream scene. And I feel like Cloud's limitless potential, his ability to kind of create reality, is actually the real key to this. And that is going to be what allows Genova and Sephiroth to even have this control over the world in the way they do.
Sleepezi has so much to say. It looks like he's coming out of his skin. But we'll stay on topic with, let's talk about Queen's Blood, the struggle between Genova, Glenn, Wutai, War of the Beasts. Go for it.
Okay, so the idea of like what you're saying, just to give people context, is that that's a Crisis Core thing, the War of the Beasts, which I know everybody loves, and it's definitely should be the crux of this entire game, and that there's no connection other than this clearly to Loveless. Anyway, there's this idea of the War of the Beasts bringing about the world's end, and that idea of the war is being very clearly reflected in Glenn, where he's trying to now incite this war between, Wutai and Midgar, which obviously I think we are all clear on is gonna be probably our raid on Midgar, sort of a lead into that. So just a big all-out battle, but the idea of that and how that ends, as Glenn is putting it, is that you have to kind of break off the fragments in order to make something whole again. That is directly reflected in the description for Sephiroth's Rebirth description, where it says that this being is trying to kind of build back up fragments of different pieces of the world to unite it, sort of in its own, I guess, image. I can't remember it right off the top of my head. But all of that seemingly, and I agree with NSP on this, is that that's all just hinging on Cloud. I think in my interpretation of it is that there's these potential realities that could come about through Holy or Meteor, and the sort of end goal of that is just to have Cloud sort of be the key to sort of turn everything. So Sephiroth needs Cloud, and then also in the same way that like Aerith needs Cloud in order to sort of enact this sort of proper unity of worlds. I think that's I don't really, I have a lot to say about what you guys were saying about flipping worlds, like the tree imagery, even in the Black Materia, where there's two trees that are, one's on the ceiling and one's on the ground.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's
imagery.
Cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what is also, I mean, I was just looking at the imagery now as BltzZ was showing it, but that's also reflected in the materia, is that the tree is like right side up, and then he turns it and the tree is upside down. So all imagery is pointing back to the Black Materia temple, like imagery. So I'm more interested in seeing, because since I just finished the game, all of this is just like crazy to me that even like Queen's Blood is relevant. I just got to the first cutscene of that. What does everybody else have to say about that? I'm interested to hear thoughts.
Yeah, I as you're playing through the game, I think the one part I got of it is at the end of Queen's Blood, where it's like, oh, this has a story. Oh, the what is it called? Lucius Luguile, the creator of Queen's Blood, is like stuck in a memory or something like that, where he's actually like in a place where he's communicating to Queen's Blood players about like the danger of this stuff. And I was like, this is weird, but it's not connecting to like main plot stuff. By the time it's at the end where it's like, oh, it's taking the form of somebody else, it's like literally like adopting the form. I'm like, all right, there's something going on here. And I'm pretty sure Queen's Blood is going to be like a spoiler for the story going forward. And I didn't have a time to like process all of it, because what the dude says in all the flashback scenes, I think is very important. And I have to like replay through the game again to like really analyze what, I forget what the dude's name is, but like the long-haired guy that you eventually fight his fucking ghost in the haunted house, I think all those elements are very, and as we have seen the payoff for a lot of this stuff, and sometimes to a degree no payoff, very deliberate. Like they've been cooking this shit for a long time, that it seems all these things are not set up just haphazardly for vibes. No. This is a story that is like aggressively trying to tie all these things together in some way. We're in part 2. We're not getting that completely. And that relates to Glenn, where obviously you have like new character coming back. The first thing we see of the interaction with Glenn and Rufus is like, oh, this guy's dead. And he's dead at the hands of the guy he's talking to. So already this is weird. but Rufus is seemingly like almost as perturbed by it as we are the player, but just goes along with it for some reason. We don't know exactly why. But still, it's like gameplay-wise, they're setting up for a massive part 3, where now we have all these elements like we've been talking about, but there's also like a world war. Why is there a world war that's about to happen? Because Sephiroth needs like pain and anguish and suffering and despair. Like he's weaponizing bad vibes. He's fucking Vigo from Ghostbusters 2.
Those are the ultimate ingredients.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of these like setup and things, and to the point where it's like, do we have like proper resolution on it? And I think as we come up to like a lot of our explanations and hopes, it's deliberately like roadblocked. Like weirdly roadblocked of like where we think this stuff can go, to a point where I find it almost impressive, where it's like, yeah, we think we're getting somewhere, and then something else pops up. It's like, nope, but we're getting somewhere. Nope. It happened so many times that I was like, this is fucking intentional, man. Like they're definitely like, they do not want us to know, in the way that we were all sort of convinced about certain things for part 1. We were kind of like, a lot of us were on board in terms of where that was going. Yeah, no, we want you to be on board that a lot of stuff is happening, but not on board with any one of those individual elements, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Blitz, what do you take?
I'm still... So, Kiki Punchy. Shout out to Kiki Punchy on Twitter. I just posted this in the chat. If you guys on the call want to go check it out, but I'm going to show it to the stream right now. Right here, they actually found this in the temple, which is super cool. So you do have like the Queen's Blood characters, like the Shadow Blood and the Emerald Witch, and if you go through, you can actually see like hieroglyphics of them in the temple, and it almost makes you want to go back through it.
Oh, I fucking love this shit,
dude! Look at this.
I love this.
Yeah,
that's so sick. That is so sick.
My God. And it's like, it's straight up Genova. I mean, I'm a little behind on the stream, but it's straight up Genova Lifeklinger.
Right. And so what's cool about this to me is we kind of had this idea that, you know, for sure Genova 2,000 years ago would impersonate people and sort of lead to the ruin. But what this is showing us is that it was like a multi-stage war. Like she probably was a political figure in Cetran civilization, and
just emulating a person.
Right. And probably something similar to what's happening with Glenn. You know, is we're seeing that same kind of geopolitical unrest try and, you know, stage the world for this. You know?
Yeah, I completely see it, where it's there's clearly a couple of like very hidden subtext examples here, but then the obvious one where they just give us the info in the end, which is like, anytime you see Sephiroth like taking the forms of like things and fuckery in Cloud's head, is effectively Sephiroth / Genova. Like their intentions are like one and the same. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and the fact that that image is just like emanating from Genova Lifeklinger, it's like, okay, well, it's right in front of our face. Right there.
My favorite part of that is that mural of Genova is its tentacles are going out and sort of stabbing like the people below it, but then if you keep following it those tentacles connect back into the imagery of trees. So it's almost like, oh, it's just all re-emulating life. Like Genova emulated the goddess, and then maybe in my mind, just with the way that Genova eventually sort of becomes in like the larger lore, it just feels like she's emulating like life and the life stream itself to a certain degree. So weird.
I think
is the Hebrew tree of life. That's what the word means.
And I think all this is doing is just giving us more character to Genova as a character, which doesn't really exist in the old game. Genova just like, you know, is a propagator of Sephiroth, and they are one and the same to a certain degree. But now it's like, okay, so here's just an insane amount of lore and reference and subtext to what Genova is. And we're just going to litter it throughout this whole goddamn game. Now there's like multiple flashback things of like, so what's real memory, what's fake memory, what's Genova vision? Like, yeah, that was very clearly without payoff yet, right? Without actual, we don't know exactly where this is going because it's just set up, you know, a part 3 that's going to definitely give us hopefully some answers for this.
This is the last thing I'll say about this, but one of the things that is really interesting about all of this is that if you are paying attention to like Loveless, a lot of the imagery just feeds back into that. But the thing that is interesting about Loveless is the fact that the ending is sort of up to interpretation.
Oh man.
And the idea of like salvation and destruction are sort of the outcomes of those two things. So, which the Guy also mentioned that at some point, like verbatim that line. But the idea of it is that if the chapter for Loveless is missing at the end, it's sort of up to interpretation, which is what Genesis ends up writing. Which is why you have the G edition, the spare the sand, the seed, and the skies. Is that the line?
No,
but
it's the line that
good.
Genesis has where he's just like, the missing final chapter. There are many theories about how the story ends, but only my theory is correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
He says that in Crisis Core.
Actually, he's the biggest FF7 fan theorist.
So this leads me to the next question, which is, given that the Loveless play and so many other connections to Crisis Core are present, and it's not just Loveless, it's Loveless G edition, like Sleepezi mentioned, when will we see Genesis and 7R? And I'm going to start with Max.
So I have come to, I don't like this character. Number one, I just to reiterate my feelings on this, it has not changed. I got to play Crisis Core again. I got to play it again. What he's doing for story related purposes does have significance, even in the older game. But the way the character is on screen and the way he speaks and talks is just the worst. So I don't care about the story. I just hate him. But I have come around that he is absolutely going to be in the next game. He's showing up. In what way is he going to show up? Is he going to be like a Weiss VR fight? Possibility. That would be low end, right? Low impact Genesis would be he's a VR fight, in some fashion. High impact Genesis, he shows up in like either a memory or a vision or something directly related to Zack. I think Zack is going to have to revisit some of this Genesis stuff. I don't think he's going to show up current time Genesis, like be respawned similar to that Sephiroth is like respawned from Genova. Sephiroth is like Genova's baby. I don't think we're getting that directly. I think we're going to get Genesis back in some way where we have to like fight against him. But to the point of which is like, is he going to be hanging around and eating apples and stuff? No, I don't think so.
I can honestly say I was wrong. I was theorizing before Rebirth dropped when they first showed the first title and you saw like the red animation go across the logo. I was thinking like, oh wow, like Genesis is going to appear in this in some way. To what extent, I didn't know, because it's, if you look at the way the animation goes, it's like when he slides his hand across his sword and he does that one attack, it's like kind of similar to that. So that immediately, and the color red, like my mind immediately went there, but obviously that was wrong. I thought he would honestly have more like cameos or like direct mentions in Rebirth. Kind of like the way that they handle like the other compilation stuff with Dirge, where it's not like full up in front of your face and they're just throwing it at you. It's like back plot device or like you said, like VR fights. I feel like that would be something like that. But when I'm thinking about it, right? What if Genesis shows up as the weapons are being released and coming into play? Because he technically is like a guardian. Minerva like gave him pass or whatever it was. I remember Sleepezi talking about it. So, and it's like something Sephiroth did not expect. Like it was something Sephiroth did not calculate or was anticipating.
Oh, that'd be cool. I was thinking you were more referring to the fact that like Kadaj, Yazoo, and crew technically show up in Remake, but in a weird, very subtexty kind of way. Mm-hmm. Where like we could get a Genesis fight like that, but it's like Genesis, but isn't just his name and face on it, Could very well be that way too. I don't think it'll be an exact model. He'll come out in that way. It could be like the Harbinger fight, where there are representations of it, and it's like something like the fans kind of can pick up on and realize.
The utilization of Genesis is kind of weird in a way, because it's so intimately tied to a real person. I mean, that was his face, and that was like clothes that he actually wore. He has it in like a music video too, and so because he is literally Gacked, I'm wondering if Gacked would come back and voice him in the Japanese track, and I'm also wondering how they would handle that in general. It does kind of make sense if it was some type of like, not necessarily we're going to use Gack's identity again, like if it was some type of like disfigured like monster type of way for him to show up rather than actually going with his likeness again and having to expense that. I could see that being kind of a way that they go, because then it's like, oh no, Genesis is here, he's still playing like a huge role in this story, but we're not explicitly showing you Genesis for that reason. So.
Yeah, and that's where I was sort of hinting at, like he shows up in a form, like maybe a more powerful form of him, in the same way that we see, like, oh, are these characters like in the future where they've like acquired all power or some shit? What they do with Kadaj and Yazoo and stuff like that.
Precisely.
I think that's a high probability. I think that's like also a low impact Genesis, right? Pretty much high impact Genesis is this bitch shows up and he just starts reciting Loveless. He floats from the sky, on his one wing and just starts reciting shit. And it's like, oh, high impact Genesis is here.
Yeah. And I kind of, like, on one hand, I kind of feel like maybe they should, right? Because they've gone all in with everything else.
Right.
That
Really?
I almost would feel disappointed now if he didn't show up in any way.
I want that so badly. You have no idea.
We know.
I know. I know you know.
There's
that
room for it
ending
to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think in general, like if realistic expectations, VR boss fight like Vice, just because it feels like a lot of those characters were sort of viewed very negatively by so many people because of their impressions from the compilation. Where now when I bring up Vice, it's like, oh, cool boss fight, man. Like that's the association to him is completely different. Same with Nero, where you now have like a direct line between him and a main character, and there's a proper use of him in the story to actually make you care. Genesis is different, I think, because he's the most famous of those kinds of characters, and he has such a presence about him. I think, unfortunately for everybody else, that he's gonna show up just as is because of his secret ending. Because so for people who don't know, Genesis is sleeping below Midgar for like the entirety of the OG after Crisis Core, all the way up to Dirge of Cerberus ending. And that sleep, to me, is very similar to the way that all of these mechanics with sleep are working in Rebirth. It almost feels like a direct reference to those things. And then he just happens to wake up. So I feel like if we're not going to get him in main story, I would put money on DLC if I was looking at this in the most ideal lens.
And
so
whose
DLC
body does
boss
he pick
fight,
up whose body does he pick up at the end of that cutscene? Is it Weiss's body?
Yeah.
it's Vice's body.
Okay.
Vice's
that's right.
Hojo free body. Yeah.
That's right. He's just like a husk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for me the answer is it really depends on, is the game diverging in a meaningful way from
Not yet.
the OG. And
Not yet.
we're not certainly we're really in that space where we're not sure if there's going to be a meaningful payoff in the main world, so we can't really answer that. But to Sleepezy's point, there does seem to be an association with the interlude world and sleep. Like when Cloud goes to sleep, you see the POV. So if the interlude world stays relevant in part 3, then I think the interlude world might be where we deal with, or worlds where we deal with Genesis. Which leads me to this question. So in the Ultimania, it was confirmed that the different stamps refer to different worlds. However, Nojima clarified that these worlds weren't parallel.
Oh, I love this. Yeah, this throws everything for a loop all of a sudden.
So what's happening with these worlds and how will it affect part 3? And I'm going to let you fight over who gets to answer first.
I'll answer first because I just read this earlier today and it had me kind of excited. So this is like the timeline / world theory. So what's the difference, right? What the hell is the difference if it's an alternate timeline or a multiverse or a world? They're the same shit. I'm like, all right, I kind of like agree with you. Like they're effectively doing the same thing. They allow like other outcomes to exist in other places. But based on that recent tweet or in translation / like interpretation from Nojima, where he doesn't want us to really think of it like a multiverse, that these are different worlds, because it's like, what is our understanding of a multiverse? Well, they are other parallel realities that have their beginning and end, right? Where characters have effectively grown up and lived with each other and have all of this history, if not maybe didn't do that. There's like an infinite amount of years and time that they spent with each other that goes across in a different way. You know, it just exists next to ours. But now they're proposing that is not the case, where it's like, no, don't think of what this stuff is that. So it's like, and now that ties back to the scene with the powwow scene in Cosmo Canyon, where the one girl is talking about her parents dying and that she could like, you know, find a way to communicate with them in this place where it more makes it feel like this is sort of a purgatory before death, where it's like almost if you die, you like revisit your memories, you revisit your dreams and your hopes before you return to the live stream or some shit like that. Maybe. And I think that's more interesting. I think that's like way more interesting that there's this sort of pseudo reality that happens as you die or like exists somewhere else that is composed of like hopes and dreams and, you know, memories and stuff. And weirdly enough, the Cetra are able to control that, where they like hide shit in it. They're like, no, this is bad. We're going to put this in one of those. So it exists in a weird way, but it doesn't have like, you know, oh, this is the universe where Cloud became a barista and he just eventually might become doing this. Like, no, it feels like it's a bit different than that now.
I think that this is like the clearest way without explicitly saying that this is not the MCU.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's like what Nojima really wanted to say. This is not going to be like, you know, the Arbiters are looking at Gaia 6472.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, Sephiroth's a good guy in that one.
Because it's really clear it really is clear for us to get that interpretation from this shit, right? Like, just based on the way media has handled multi-universal stuff over the past 5-6 years.
Yeah. And I think they want to draw some distinction between how other things are implementing multiverse and how they want to implement it, and to not go in with those expectations.
All of it makes me glad, because like I was getting so many comments back in like 2020, 2021. People were like, the chip bag stamp is not important. And I'm like, what do you mean, bro? They slowed it down.
Dude, it's on the screen. It has screen time. It should have a name in the credits.
They're like, dude, it drops bass when it slows down in front of you. Like, yeah, here, focus on this, and then goes away. And I'm like, whoa, that is...
I do find it very funny when like, would you like make a highlight on something, and regardless of remake or rebirth, you'll notice something that's like, that's weird, feels intentional, and people are like, that's not important. That's not important.
Yeah. And you know, too, I think that like a lot of the times with like remake in particular, with the way remake ended, it kind of allowed people to write the story themselves. And so whatever they thought or wanted to happen, they could just say, that's exactly what's going to happen. I've looked at all these other points. And you could go and say like, hey, but man, what about this? Not important. Not
important.
Yeah.
It's like Rebirth almost reinforces that, because there's like 3 common things at the end of this game that are probably many more that are left to interpretation, but 3 common interpretations at the end of this game now that they almost address in the Ultimania, where it's like, hey, so you think it's this, or this, huh? That was intentional. Like, oh, okay. So we're not supposed to know.
Yeah, I think because I was watching like one of your videos earlier too, Max, where you say that like, you know, the point of the Ultimanias is not to give you answers. And in fact, you know, I think really the point of the Ultimania is to give us more informed questions.
More intrigue. Yeah.
Right. So that we're asking the right questions and not like...
That's a good call.
Like, you know, like going off on bullshit that's completely irrelevant, which is kind of easy to do in a story that's so left up to interpretation like this one.
I sort of made fun of that. I sort of like very casually made fun of that in moments where I was like, so we're going to get the ending where it's like Zack, Cloud, and Tifa start kissing. And then they pull in Red 13 and they start kissing. And then he grabs Vincent and they got Red Seed Sith and they all start kissing. Like, it's almost like, it feels like the developers at some point during this, and I feel that there's a bit of meta here where they show us so many fucking dogs, bro. How many dogs have I seen now? I've seen 7 different breeds of dogs. There's about to be 15 different dogs. You want me to keep track of where all these dogs are and what universes these are, to a point where the last one we see is comedy. It is.
Right.
It is. The last one we see is the most comedic character in the whole game.
Oh, Johnny
shows up with a plush, and he's like, "Huh?" And then he pieces out. It's almost like the devs are telling us, "Okay, so this isn't actually that important at this point, but it's good to know that this is for you to identify what's happening." But now we're almost making fun of it, you know?
Yeah, I can't wait for the Doge timeline to show up.
I agree. I think that there's a notable distinction between the MCU and what's happening here. And like you mentioned, I think that the biggest clue we get to kind of what's happening is the dialogue outside the Cosmo Canyon AA meeting thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I agree. And so my follow-up question is, just to the parallel worlds thing, is, does it still matter in part 3?
Oh, I want to know what Sleep has to say about this. Is there any more to that question?
Not really.
Okay. I want to know what Sleep has to say about this. I'm very curious because you're kind of fresh on the ending.
Is it going to be relevant moving forward?
Is this over? Are we done with the parallel worlds thing?
I don't think so at all, just because of literally the implications of Zack at the end. First of all, Sephiroth gives us the big middle finger, is like, yeah, I've been talking about reunion like this whole game, and now like I'm separating them. And then he does, and then at the very end, Zack is like, oh well, doesn't mean that this can't happen again. So I feel like that's just prime setup for just some, I don't know what else, some shenanigans to happen, but I don't know what the implications of that are. I just feel like and this is just going back to what you guys were saying about like the ending of Remake before, where it's like people trying to look at the mechanics of the chip bag and all of that other stuff, is I've always just viewed this as, what are the character implications of the actions that are happening? The world is just a reflection of whatever's going on with Cloud. So right now the worlds are split up again, and Cloud is the most disconnected he has ever been. And eventually we know what will happen is that he will reunite. So if that seemingly is connected to Cloud in some way, which I think is the payoff, then yeah, that's going to be the function of it, is just to better reflect Cloud's inner sort of journey.
I've had to say the same thing to like my chat as we're talking about these endings. Why do all this multiverse stuff? Why do all this like crazy story stuff? And you have to think of them as storytelling tools first and foremost. Like, why does this shit exist? Biggest one, so Zack can live in some way. So Zack can exist and communicate with characters, and we can hear his conversations that he might not have ever had before. I feel like there's like a setup for this in the next game where he's going to get like the letters from Aerith or some shit where it's like, oh, this is going to come around in some way. In the same way where it's like, it exists to give you the impression that she can be savable, to eventually find out, oh, well, turns out we didn't save her. You know, it's going to set up questions and give our characters moments in the same way that Sleep is saying, where it's like, yeah, these are tools to enhance already existing characters in FF7.
And it says a lot too, because there's the fact that they show us all those different dogs, and it's like really important, something we got to keep track of and pay attention to. They specifically, there's a quote from the devs that say they purposely did not show a dog at the end where Zack is, because they want to keep that as a secret. And to me, thinking Sephiroth merging worlds, are they all like combined as one now? Where like Zack is currently around, like I don't know if it's the Beagleverse or if they're all just combined. They're like an entirely new dog now, all in one. Zack eventually he's alive now, and he technically will meet up with the party in that way.
That definitely seems very apparent. Yeah, go for it.
Well, for TheNightSkyPrince, I want to frame this in a way specific to you, which is, okay, so like Max said, a lot of the payoff so far for the quote-unquote non-multiverse, the nultiverse, has been these character moments. To you, in part 3, does there need to be more of a payoff than just letting us spend more time with these characters?
So, as someone who has been on the critical side of the implementation of the multiverse, in order for me to get full satisfaction of it, I do need Chekhov's gun to fire, and I need it to be intensely important. and not just in a way to implement more character fan service. I want to be able to look at this, the overarching story as well, and say that this is the superior telling of Final Fantasy VII. And I think that the multiverse can't be, I'm using multiverse very loosely here to describe the world, just to be clear. But I want it to be such that it is core and integral to the story and not something that's auxiliary and just in our peripheral vision with how it works. So I do want it to be something that is hugely important, and I want it to pay off in a way that is not just, we need a way to bring Zack back, right?
Yeah, it needs to do something.
Fulfilling. Yeah, it needs to do something, and it needs to make me go, that made the story better.
Yeah, I completely agree. If the question, I missed the first part of it, Seal, good. You need to just explain what it was again?
Basically, just that you were describing how so far the quote unquote multiverse has really been for expositional purposes to allow us to have more time.
So far,
does it need to have, and will it have, an even bigger payoff, perhaps a more concrete one, in the third part to justify itself?
Yeah, and yes, I agree with NSB here, where it does need to come around, but I don't think it needs to like Black or White have to fully come around where we just have to explore everything. Like, ambiguity is a big part of just FF7 of interpretation. So I think, but to be real, there's so many questions already that part 1 is set up that part 2 gave us some, I sort of have to put myself back in the headscape of part 1. We were just wondering, all right, these characters are from the fucking future, man. Sephiroth knows of shit. Advent Children music is all over the place. This isn't a remake, dude. This is a sequel. That was the big question, right? We're wondering. Aerith clearly knows shit. How the hell? It's like she knows Cloud. She knows that she's gonna die. Don't fall in love with me, stuff. I'm like, bro, what is happening here? These characters aren't acting like they normally do. So that was a question leading into this one, where we didn't have answers on that shit yet. It felt like we knew the answer, where it's like, there's enough subtext here to be like, we see where you're going with this. And at least in Rebirth, while not giving us that 100%, all this game did was just reinforce those elements that, yes, Aerith is and it does it in almost in a comical way, where it's like, oh, everybody in part 2 seems to know that Aerith is going to die except Cloud. Everyone's like, you gotta save her, bro. You gotta save her, bro. You gotta save her, bro. And Cloud's just like, what are you guys talking about? He's just like, of course I'll save her. I'll do bodyguard with her, no problem. Yeah. But nobody knows, but effectively, everybody seems to have an idea but Cloud. So this game's aware of that. This game's aware of that. Aerith is aware of the events. She has a dream where he's like, yeah, we'll do this next time. And she's like, yeah, next time. All right, Cloud, fucking listen. There ain't gonna be a next time, dude. This bitch is hunting me through multiverses over here and stuff. And she's about to get me. I know this is going to happen.
That whole context of that ending Aerith scene is that conversation in meta commentary.
Yes.
That's all that is. And that's why that's the payoff of the game, too, is because you know that this is the last time that they're actually going to have a conversation.
Yeah, which is why I love that scene.
A goodbye.
That is the actual, us as the player don't get to say goodbye to Aerith, and I have to remind people, we did! We literally did! With subtext, we did! That scene with Cloud and Aerith is them finally having a moment together that they never really got to get when that was in the OG, and Aerith takes that as the opportunity to do that. So again, as you were saying, we're getting some payoff here. Right, there's definitely some payoff that happened in Rebirth. It doesn't seem as immediately obvious because it's not 100% payoff. It's 3/4 payoff. And that's where I hope this eventually goes. They need to give us not the 3/4 payoff, but I think we need 90%, dude. We need 90% payoff for where this shit is going. Cetra stuff, Genova stuff, fucking Queen's Blood stuff. We need to see where these things eventually come and go. But do I think there's going to be a little bit of ambiguity at the end of this story in part 3? I think there should be. There should not be we know everything about the live stream works. Here's the Nomurian text. It is 1,700 pages. You can read more about it here. No. There should be some interpretation at the end in the same way that the OG FF7 was. Do I think it'll be the same way? No, not at all.
Right.
They need to do something new with it.
Do you guys ever think about that big exposition scene that has to happen in part 3? Where Sephiroth has to be I've been traveling the multiverse and this is what happened. That scene is going to be so pivotal to like the entire project.
And it was in this one too, when they're traveling through the multiverse and shit, and he's like, "I'm just gonna break this shit for you down, dude."
Right. To like,
he felt so. I felt like that was the only way to handle it is that like he's the thing that scared me about that scene was how Sephiroth acts about like the voices in the live stream. He's like, listen to all of this beautiful music essentially, and Cloud's just like, this sucks. Everyone's screaming. I don't like it here. That's the way that you execute that sort of discussion though, is that you make it about building the image of what you think Sephiroth is. You strengthen that sort of mystery around him. That's something that if that was all we got as far as that particular dialogue about how the worlds merge, I think for right now, in retrospect, it feels okay. I'm satisfied with that for now. I'm not wondering what that is right now.
And I was at a point where I think I might have been with Seal on this, where I was like coming to the conclusion where it's like, dude, yeah, I think it's done. I think like he enacted his vision. He's been telling us the whole time that he's like, hey, bro, I am going to like merge all of this stuff together. I'm going to a confluence of all your bad vibes. I'm going to weaponize that and harbinge it into this one spot, the spot that's the most critical for our party, which is like her death. But now it's like they set up so many other things, even in the Ultimania, where I was pretty confident that all the worlds merged here, whether or not it was one or two or all of them, that was his goal. And then the Ultimania says that like, oh no, Aerith like prevents that from happening in the end. And it's like, oh shit, so there goes that. Another thing that you're fairly confident of, but it's like, oh, you get a little thing pops up later where it's like, maybe not, that isn't the case.
For me, Rebirth, as it stands, like, one of my favorite scenes was a multiverse scene, but it was the only one that I was like, oh, this is part of the payoff. So it still does feel like we're getting little bits of something that they're setting up later, and that was the quote unquote farewell to Aerith. That scene in the church was so transcendently done. That whole date sequence was really like, okay, this is a potential payoff of like a afterlife or a live stream, is that we get these really close character connections. But the more I've stepped away from it, the more I'm like, okay, but in part 3, if this isn't addressed, I think people are going to feel a certain way. And I think agree. I'm one of them. Yeah.
I think that, but that spot did do a lot where it felt like that dream specifically from Aerith, like, really does a lot of explaining, especially from the previous one, where it's like, oh, is this dream like the one that was in part 1, where Cloud walks outside and it's Omni Aerith that clearly knows way more about what's going on. But I think it also did a pretty good expansion of more reinforcing the idea that the 5D chess that Aerith and Sephiroth are playing with each other, where you see Sephiroth hunting her, where it's like, oh, so Sephiroth is essentially multi-dimensional, traveling through these worlds, hunting her down in the same way that, he hunts her down into the OG party and the OG game and stuff like that, where it's like, whoa, how many Aeriths has this dude killed? So that also adds like a really sinister, and it's also handled super well. Like the way that scene is like, fuck, dude, you could have ended the game here and it would have been incredible. It's so good. So that's where I'm like sort of confident that once we have moved away from having to explain all this stuff, and the next game is catharsis, that it's going to be like, oh, and I have to give a shout out to anybody that's a dad out there. There was recently a Bluey episode. Yes, it's taken over my life as well. That is nothing but catharsis for 3 seasons of setup, where it's just like, God damn, dude, there's been 4 years of setup for these things. Is it going anywhere? And the latest episode was like 40 minutes of catharsis, where it's like, oh, this shit is amazing. So I'm like, this is where the next FF7 game is going to be, dude. It's going to feel so good.
You heard it here. Bluey lore.
Bluey X FF7. Telling you guys, it's there.
Dude, I love it. So, okay, I'm jumping around with questions just because this is really apropos to what we're talking about. And it's this. So there's been a lot of dev comments that talk about the relationship between Advent Children and Remake, and things like, this will add up to Advent Children, or this will link to Advent Children, but it never says something as clear as this will lead, or the events here are just a prequel to Advent Children. So in you guys' mind, is the link more thematic, or is it an indication that maybe the Reed trilogy is in some way a sequel?
I'm ready to go. If anybody else is ready to go and wants to talk really bad, I've been talking a lot.
Hey, you're the guest of honor, man.
Go for it, dude.
We've waited years.
Go ahead, NSB. You go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
All right. So I'm thinking that this does link up to Advent Children, but behind it instead of in front of it, which is kind of like where we all been from the start here.
Yeah.
I think that even, in Remake, there was already a lot of references to Advent Children. It would be really interesting if this whole project just didn't end up being a sequel. And it's just like its own
Certainly
thing.
would.
Yeah, but I
feel like explaining there.
Yeah, but I feel like that would, at this point, would be incredibly strange. Like it would almost be like, because you have this setup of like future timelines and the way these worlds work, and you have Kadaj and Laz and Yazoo coming in earlier in different forms, that it would seem incredibly strange for this to all lead into Advent Children. Now, currently, with what we have, even though there's some wildly different stuff happening right now, we haven't had anything that really says Advent Children can't take place after this.
Sure.
Because this is like an absolute contradiction. Something like Jessie being alive and then her never showing up in Advent Children or something like that would completely contradict that story. So technically, it is still not the case that Advent Children cannot happen with this current chain of events. But it still seems more likely to me, and probably more fulfilling with the story that they have set up, that Advent Children has already happened.
So I completely with you there. I think there's almost everybody that's talking here is sort of on board that like the events of Advent Children have somehow taken place in some way. Like in some way, our characters are hyper aware of their futures, if not aware that they get killed and don't effectively become full powerful like Sephiroth. It feels like there's 4D chess happening in the background. It's like, okay, so these characters seem to have like a hyper awareness of future and past events, more so than our obvious main party, which is just playing a remake. So the one that got me in this one, which is where I'm pretty confident on where I feel this story is eventually going to go, is the way Aerith is trying to take care of Cloud. Like from not just in our current time, Aerith, you need to go to sleep, you need to take care of yourself, like please take care of yourself type of thing. Also, we get a scene that is almost identical to an Advent Children Aerith scene. There's a part where Cloud is going to the Forgotten City, and he's going to go save the kids. And Aerith has a conversation with him, like from the live stream, like communicating with Cloud sort of thing in his head sort of situation. And she's like, hey, you're about to like break down. I'm paraphrasing. You're about to break down, but it's a good thing you're going. Like this is a good sign. And he pretty much is saying like, well, all I really want is your forgiveness. And then the scene ends. So it's clear that like Aerith is trying to take care of Cloud. Like he's in a bad mental state. Anytime Cloud is in a bad mental state, Aerith is sort of like trying to be there for him. There's a spot in this game that almost emulates that 100%, and it's the part in the dream where Aerith is about to give Cloud the white materia, and she's like, whatever happens, do not blame yourself. And I'm like, oh, this is just the same shit as Advent Children. Like she's just the same thing. She knows what's going to happen. She knows how Cloud falls apart. It's like this version that we're seeing of Aerith in a dream is aware that the events of Advent Children eventually happen, that Cloud just breaks down and goes to an even worse spiral than he was almost at before because his guilt just kills him, you know? And he has space cancer, and his son does, and so do all of his neighbors, dude. It's the worst. So I don't see an ending of this just setting up for that. Let's just give everyone space cancer in 5 years. I'm like,
yeah, I'm gonna say in both. Like it doesn't make sense to go back and redo all of this, and
Yeah,
in the end, just give them all space cancer.
Let's have everyone have to get a phone call from Aerith to cure your space cancer, while maybe tens of thousands of you, if not more, die from it. It's like that does not seem like the ending our Aerith that wants to nurture and support and help them through their problems would want. So to me, acknowledging Advent Children happens makes sense, and I think we're going to get some massive hints at that in the next game. But I don't think the story builds up to Advent Children happening. I think the whole point of this is so that Advent Children doesn't fucking happen.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to fight Sephiroth and do all this shit again and have his stupid, shitty kids. Like, we don't need that. We don't have to eventually go there. I think we're setting up to a story that kills Sephiroth. We are going to take his ass out. Where there's acknowledgement of him existing in the live stream and shit. No. I think that's the point of the re-trilogy, is that this is going to be the final end of this piece of shit. We're finally taking him down. We do not have to do this stuff anymore.
Precisely. And I also think, too, that we're getting this new series of events that are happening with the worlds, with the Terror in the Sky. Like, what is the point, I feel like, if it all just leads back in the same place so that Advent Children can happen?
Yeah,
exactly.
If it's pointless, right? Yeah.
Especially if Aerith and Omni Aerith is doing all this stuff, like, why would she want that to happen? She clearly doesn't. She's clearly fighting with Sephiroth in the fucking live stream to prevent him from giving literally the planet space cancer and murdering everybody. So, and that sort of just backs up the thought process of like Cloud's materia. I think that's where this is all going. I think Cloud's materia is quite literally going to get filled up of all of his like memories, dreams, and hopes and knowledge of him killing Sephiroth in all these other timelines and stuff, where he like, I think we're going to literally relive Advent Children moments in the next game, like Fusion Sword and all, but in like a memory in some port where Cloud is finding himself in the live stream. I think we're going to revisit those things where he's like, what is happening? He's on top of like collapsed Midgar and Sephiroth is about to whoop his ass and you have to like play it. And you have to remember, you've been here before, dude. You have the energy to kill this guy. It's up to you. You guys have to know that it's there and it fills the goddamn materia with it or something like that.
Oh man, I love that. I love that if you just get like playable portions that kind of like pop up in FF7, kind of like almost like how they have like Zack here, but it'd be like a little bit more meaty. And you start getting all these flashes of Advent Children stuff. Yeah. And then it kind of like leads in. Yeah. That would
even
be
like the OG finality, like just get moments of him fighting shirtless Sephiroth and stuff like that. Although they'll probably save that for the very, 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 very end. But it feels like that's what we're setting up. We're setting up for a place where we don't have to revisit Advent Children again.
I'm praying right now. I actually think that Nojima's in the chat.
That's literally what I think that they should start part 3 on. Actually, you've given me the one thing I want part 3 to start doing.
I don't know where part 3 should start either.
What, shirtless
Just
Sephiroth?
Do something. That would be amazing. Yes. Is do something that clearly illustrates to the audience that Advent Children's ending is not happening the way that, like, we're not going there. Something happens there that deviates, and you're going to be on edge for the rest of the game because of that. You're going to be like, well, now, what the fuck, dude? Like, where does this go?
Damn, imagine that if part 3 literally opens on an Advent Children flashback. Cloud has the different costume. He's got the fusion sword, and all of a sudden, he's like climbing destroyed Midgar and in the hunt for like Sephiroth or some shit or Kadaj, and then it cuts off right before that, the same way that Zack's backflash does in so Rebirth. Cool. That would be fucking wild, man.
There is, speaking of Nojima really quickly, just to touch on this, is it a sequel prequel thing or remake, whatever, there's a line from Nojima talking about Advent Children after, I guess it's in like a documentary or something like that, but he talks about how the ending of Advent Children is the beginning of Cloud's acceptance of grief, and that there's still a long journey ahead of him to sort of deal with that. That's when I read that and I go back and play Remake or look at Rebirth, that's what this game feels like, is Cloud going through and actually analyzing his grief. And that's especially where it feels Rebirth ends to set up part 3, is that now that's a part of the resolution, and that's the payoff of Advent Children's resolution is that he forgives himself. This game feels like that's where this ends. So why do we need Advent Children other than to set up this game?
Yes. Yeah, Advent Children feels like it's the stepping stone for the remake series to even begin.
Exactly.
I think we're kind of coming on the fact that we've got a end game settled for Aerith, and it's, to defeat Sephiroth for good forever and save Cloud, so that the really obvious plot point where they're trying to say that, like, Sephiroth, in order to kill Sephiroth, you have to kill Cloud. Well, it seems like what they're kind of setting up is that Aerith is ahead of that somehow.
Yeah.
And so, like, the fake out is Cloud has to die, but the actual payoff is that he doesn't.
Yeah.
But what is Sephiroth's in endgame? So what does Sephiroth intend to do to the planet? Because even though Meteor is meant to destroy the world, or it was, Sephiroth continually claims that he wants to extend the life of the planet. And this isn't just in Rebirth. There was dialogue at the Edge of the Road in Remake, where, like, if you look at the Materials Ultimania, like, the subtext of it is that Aerith didn't agree with the way that Sephiroth wanted to save the planet. So there's this weird muddled thing here where Sephiroth has this end game that somehow involves the prolonging of life of the planet. What do we think is going on with that?
I'll say it's not just the same as it was before. It's not just like, oh, let's just give him the black materia so we can summon Meteor. No. It's not. That's not it now. That's not his big thing.
Yeah, I think it's because, like, they described it before as, like, using the planet as a vessel. I think in some form he wants to...
And Advent Children.
Yeah, and it's like... And obviously, like, this is taking place after Advent Children, so it's like he doesn't want to, like, destroy the planet. He wants to strengthen it in the best possible way so that when he consumes it later, or Genova consumes it later, however they go about it, it would be in the best possible state.
He uses the term infinity now. I will, like, reign over infinity, like all worlds, all realities type of thing. So it's like, again, the scale isn't just Meteor to our planet in the same way that Hojo at the end of the game tells Rufus, even in regards to their efforts, like, he says something along the lines of, we should be thinking way bigger. And I think that's almost a tell to the player that, like, all right, so this is about to expand to a point that is much larger than just, I have to deliver the black materia to Sephiroth to summon Meteor. Now, I think this is going to go way bigger. Like, he's trying to get in control of a lot more, like all of reality.
I think that there is definitely an interesting takeaway from what we've already seen sort of depicted in Remake about how Sephiroth perceives life and death, where there's a lot of just in the compilation about the acceptance of death being a part of sort of the idea of what makes up, the good side is that you have to sort of accept the fact that life will eventually end. And if you can't accept that, that's sort of what Sephiroth represents. So in Rebirth, he's not just like, oh, I exist in the live stream and I'm just kind of doing my thing. Now he's like, no, this shit is awesome. I want this to last forever. So he, at this particular point, is just denying all aspects of even the concept of death in the way that you need to recognize it. And that's super clear, again, going back to the scene where he's showing Cloud all the worlds, where he's like, listen to how, like, this chanting that everyone's doing. And then he's just like, no, this is screaming. Like, this is entirely wrong.
Cloud's interpretation is not the same.
It's disconnected. Sephiroth is disconnected from his humanity to such an extent that he's just doing whatever he can to sort of survive and keep everything as it is. I honestly, I don't know if anybody else got this impression, but it feels like time compression from Final Fantasy VIII, where he's just like, everything now just exists and it will continue to exist in that world. But I don't know. That's sort of, it just seems like big, lofty Sephiroth thing, which is fine. I'm fine with it.
You also remind me, as you were talking, about how what Sephiroth says to Cloud at the end of Remake, where he's like, I will not die, nor will I have you die. Like, he needs him for something, and these are the things we just don't know. These are like the big questions of, like, 7 seconds to the end, like all of this super poetic stuff that he starts talking about. We're like, what are you talking about, man?
There's a lot of that
to do with freedom. Like, and NSP brought it up, the only secret scene, the only optional scene in Remake was when you beat Top Secrets and Chadley throws that big info dump where he says that your infinite potential allowed me to break the chains of my programming and become my own. So I think the reason that Chadley was able to use him for that is probably what Sephiroth's after too. I think there's something really there, and I think it probably gets into the Jung and Yogacara stuff that we'll get into later. I do want to. I'm going to bridge into this because this is the thing that what a lot of people might have disagreements about, and it's, did Aerith really die? Is she alive in another world? Is she an illusion? Or a live stream ghost playing chess with Omni Sephiroth in the ending of Rebirth? What do we think? I'm going to start with Sleepezi.
No,
Is she
not.
alive?
No,
Yes.
you're not.
With me.
No, you're not.
Really quickly then, I think going back to what I already said is that I think that there's a lot going on and on purpose. I think it's all intentionally happening because once I saw the Ultimania note of, oh, this is supposed to be the question that you're left with, and people are saying Genova, or is it, a headache or something like that? I think there's definitely truth to the Genova thing because of the effects on the camera that we've seen with other Genova headaches, but we also get this really odd moment after Aerith is stabbed by Sephiroth, after the edit is made, where the music cue in is Aerith's chime from the very beginning of the game, the live stream sequence thing, which in Remake, as we know, is also our introduction to the Omni Aerith concept with her eyes opening, which is at the end of the OG. So I do think that Aerith is making some kind of decision here. I also think that this is all because Cloud couldn't handle his shit and he's like completely broken. So I feel like this is both Aerith trying to coddle Cloud into that moment of resolution. And then it's also Sephiroth's peak moment of needing Cloud to suffer. Yeah. And he's fine with the illusion of that now, because what he's banking on happening is when everyone realizes that, like, hey, like, we didn't see Cloud stab, or Cloud save Aerith. We didn't see Sephiroth stab Aerith. Cloud probably did this. He's banking on the entire thing crumbling and just making Cloud even worse.
Whoa.
So that's what I think.
Wow, that's fucking brutal, dude. Holy damn. I never even put that together, that since the other party has not witnessed the actual event, right? We just assuming because we're Cloud, we are the player, right? That, yes, the rest of the party could have seen her on the ground and wondered if he killed her.
Yeah. They're gonna, well, and that's
I never
why
thought of that shit. That would make sense. So already it's really bad, bro. Okay, even without that, it's really bad. Just saying, exactly. This could like drive Cloud to like run away. Where I don't think we're gonna lose him in the same way. I think like the visions of him walking as the robed figure, I think he pieces out where he's like, fuck these guys, I'm gonna go do my own thing. My girlfriend's still alive. We're out of here. Like, I think that might set up for that shit.
So, that would be great.
So you're saying that she's dead?
Say it.
Me?
You gotta.
Yeah, I say she's fucking dead. I said it.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
I think. But here's the thing. I guess I'll just take my turn now.
Yes.
I think that is largely the understood conclusion. Like at the beginning, there was definitely arguments of like, yo, she made it, right? Maybe she made it on the timelines, but clearly what happened to our characters currently, she's toast. Like she died the same way that she died in the old one. There was some confusing stuff that happened, but she's dead. And it feels like that's almost like, yeah, a lot of people are down for that. A lot of people are down with the fact that Cloud is clearly going through some wild mind prison shit. And she's not there, but he sees the way he sees her in the way that he thinks he should, you know? I had to even use this example where it's like a character dying in a story isn't inherently sad. what makes a scene sad, or what makes a character's death sad, is how the other characters react to it and the way they interpret the scene. And what's happening to Cloud? Well, he's just not. You know, we don't get anything from him. But if you look at what happens to everybody else, it's mega sad, dude. It's big sad moment for everybody outside of our main character. That's where I was able to pull the conclusion early on, where it's like, no, she's toast. She ain't coming back. Like, this is it. She might be around in some way, in the same way that Aerith is around in Advent Children, bro. Like, she calls everybody on their cell phone. I keep having to remind people of this. But still, I think to our party, she's gone. You know, her presence is like a spiritual sort of one that, like, you know, I'll always be with you kind of thing.
I think Aerith is dead, but she can't, like, she's so powerful that she can't die in the same way that we would perceive like death. I think she's still beyond and pulling strings from within the live stream. And
oh yeah,
that is, I always thought like that was something that Cetra specifically could do. And maybe like Aerith has like figured out that element to it, to where she could actually manipulate things in that way. That character, yes, she's dead. She's not physically going to be around the party and stuff. It's going to be made quite clear to us in that way in part 3. But what excites me the most about all of this is I always loved the breakdown of Cloud, seeing Cloud get depressed, get back good, and then Sephiroth just wrecks his entire world in the crater and sends him on this like crazy spiral. I wasn't expecting, like, at the end of this game for Cloud to go into this happy-go-lucky like mood. It's so like uncomfortable in the best possible ways.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so something that I didn't know that I wanted, you know? Like,
you know why you feel that way? Because Crisis Core Reunion exists. They a year ago were like, hey, we want you to know all the events. Yeah. And I'm like, why the fuck are they doing this? Why are they re-releasing Advent Children? Why do they want us to know this shit? Isn't this spoilers? What if it's not? What if it enhances? What if you knowing this stuff enhances the story? Because now Cloud is an unreliable narrator, is even more unreliable than he was in 1997. Now he's super unreliable.
Yeah, and seeing him jump into all these different emotions too. Like, we see him friggin' begging and being basically like Gollum. Like, hey, that's mine. Give it. Like, yeah. Seeing him go through all these different, like, Cody did a phenomenal job with this, and he wasn't joking when he said he can't wait for us to see like the different emotions and different ranges that Cloud can actually reach in Rebirth. And it has me even more excited for like when, you know, he does eventually like stop being happy-go-lucky and gets depressed and broken. What will he be like in that moment? And then the Let's Mosey scene when he finally like recollects and gets himself back. What will that Cloud be? How different will that Cloud be in comparison to what we've already seen?
Yeah, and I just to throw it out, I think that scene of triumph in the OG game is probably my favorite part of the game. It legit, when he gets out of there, he realizes who he is and the job that they have to do. Let's go whoop ass. And then the music kicks in. It's like, this shit is peak, dude. This is so. Every time I revisit FF7, it's my favorite moment. So all this is doing is just making that to be the biggest shit it possibly could.
Yeah, and I've got a good question about that later. I think that will kind of wrap us up. But TheNightSkyPrince, let's get it. Where's Aerith?
Okay.
Schrodinger's Aerith.
So earlier on in the discussion, I said, you know, we imagined, you know, Aerith lives or Aerith dies, and the only real way to surprise me would be a third secret thing, and they did exactly that. So, is Aerith dead or alive? I'm still going to say the only real way to surprise me is to do a third secret thing with Aerith. In the same way that I could not have imagined watching the tech demo back on PlayStation 3 that Aerith's death would end up like this. It's really still hard for me to imagine what's going to happen with Aerith after that. So I feel like there may be an answer that is somehow even more complicated than alive or dead.
To be real, when you read in the Ultimania where they're like, is she illusion? Is she a cloud hallucination? Does she live in another timeline? I think those are the three ones that they sort of like throw out, even in the Ultimania. And to be real, I think all of them technically could be true. Like, it might just be all of them in some way. They can consider the other timeline one to technically be Omni Aerith, you know, that is just around and existing. Cloud is clearly hallucinating in some way. Like, there could be answers for all of that shit by the end of the game.
She has the same capabilities, if not more, than Sephiroth.
Yes. Yeah, Sephiroth is actually for the first time depicted as big mad after Aerith shows up, helps fight Cloud, and at the end of that scene, he's like holding a sword up, he's like, son of, I worked so hard for this shit. he's like upset by it. I worked so hard for this, and you fucked it up.
I love it. I
first
clearly
time you see
underestimated you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say it's kind of the first time you see him ever like lose his cool.
It is.
Really.
No, it's the first time you see Sephiroth actually mad. He's always like calculating, and he's like, the person with the plan the whole time until that one moment after he's defeated, and it's like, oh damn. Even in the end of Remake, when Cloud is about to like fucking asunder him with that big ass strike from the whole party in the end, he's smiling. He's cool with it.
Yeah.
I know where this is going. And it's that one moment at the end of Rebirth. No, he's not cool with this. This was not what I planned.
Exactly.
That's exactly what he wanted. He wanted
Yeah.
the Whispers in his control in order to continue to make them do his bidding and basically help him have a third arm.
I will throw out though, before we get into the next big seal topic, what happens right after that is that he flies away and then he looks back at Cloud and Aerith together and he starts laughing.
Yeah.
And they're like, why is he laughing? And Aerith, not really knowing what the heck this 5D chess is gonna be, what's the next play? She doesn't even know. And she's like, well, he knows this isn't over because he's not dead. But Sephiroth is seemingly cool with it now. I guess I just got my ass kicked, but now I'm cool with it because I'm looking down there and I see Cloud and Aerith together. I tried this shit before. I tried to put Cloud against Tifa. It didn't work. It made them almost smoochy. That's not what I wanted. It was clearly not Sephiroth's intention to get Cloud and Tifa to smoochy. So I think what we're getting at is big hints that like Sephiroth is going to use Aerith. Maybe not currently, but I'm going to use the fact that in your head she's alive. I'm going to use that against you.
fully agree. I think the next time we see Aerith in the story, it probably won't be. It'll be Genova, type thing.
There's definitely that moment in the game that I think we're all certain on. It's like, this is an Aerith where like Tifa's crying in front of him and then he turns to the left and Aerith is just like dead-eyed, like staring at Cloud, being like, exactly. It's like, okay, he's going to get fucked with the next game for sure.
Yeah.
So-
and as much as like the last ending has a lot of interpretations, I think, all those three things like they're saying, they could all technically be true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and before I move on to the next question, which is what's going on with Zack, just to prepare you mentally, I'll give my answer to this, which is that I think that she has become something greater and that she is feeding an illusion to Cloud to prevent him from being, turning into a robe, from going the way of Roche and Broden. And so the reason that he is seeing what he's seeing is just because Aerith is playing chess. And the chess move is, you wanted to use despair against him, but I'm going to give him this hope so that he stays alive long enough for him to fall into the live stream and Tifa to help him out. But
Sure.
Endgame, what do I think about Aerith's fate? So I think that what she's transcended to become is ultimately better than alive, and to the point where it loses some of the meaning of her death, right? So she's now this transcendent being, and it's like it kind of eliminates some of the stakes of death. How I think they will subvert this is that I think whatever Holy does, whatever it's turned her into, will make her not just lose her life, but her afterlife. She will be the most permanent kind of death at the end of this, that she will like become something that ultimately defeats, the corruption that Sephiroth has done. And she will not only die, she will lose her
big dead
afterlife.
she big dead now.
She
love
can't
it.
call nobody in Midgard now.
I think that's what's being set up. I'm not saying that I like it. I'm just saying that that's kind of what the visual language is being. That's what I'm interpreting the setup is that she's taken agency back. Like there's no way that her death could be random anymore.
Yeah.
That's gone. They've decided to do another thing. So a way for her to not be, to use the trope fridge, is to empower her and allow her some agency in making the sacrifice.
Because
That's
she is
not gonna-
self-sacrificing. That's her character. Like, she literally has a move for it in this
Called
game, for
noble
goddamn
sacrifice.
sake.
Yeah.
So I think her coming to that conclusion at the end makes a ton of sense to me personally, and it also fixes like the Advent Children isms of like the credits where Cloud's fucking driving around Hawaii and shit, and Aerith is just in the flower field. She's always like with him, but she's like a spirit that's with him, sort of, because she talks to him every once in a while. You know, we get that. What if Cloud actually loses that? Like, actually has to say goodbye, actually has to come to terms with this shit, you know? That like, yeah, I think that thematically fits FF7 super well.
Yeah.
Right.
The idea of just
lovely.
having to let her go, like, finally.
Yes.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't go as far as like losing her afterlife, but I think what would probably happen is just more like she loses her ability to have that connection with everyone else and Cloud in particular, so that it's not like her soul is like completely dismantled. Because I think that's not JRPG to me.
Yeah.
That would be like really surprising if they went that far.
Maybe ambiguously
Exactly.
gone, but maybe connected.
There you go.
That would work. Yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah.
Ambiguous. Is she around? Is she not? Is she alive? Like, is she a spirit? Like, I think that'll still be left in the air without as much like, you know, oh, is she literally a manifestation of Cloud's brain, funky brain? I don't think we're going to get that. But I think the ambiguity of her being around.
You'll see a flicker of her in the church, and you'll never know.
Oh, there you go.
If she had complete soul death, or if she's a illusion in Cloud's mind. You'll never know.
I love it.
Yeah.
I fucking love it. It pretty much bring her back to what she effectively was in OG FF7. Like, is she still around playing with these kids? Was she the one that did this stuff with the live stream? The shot of her at the end, the final shot. Like, yes, that is where Aerith should be at the end of everything.
I love it. So is Zack alive?
I think he is now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Do you
so.
think he's alive? I'm sorry, I should specify. What's going on with Zack?
Yeah.
Is he alive
Zack?
in the Prime world or what?
Yeah, I think that's why they specifically didn't show us a dog. And they basically made a mention to that too. The devs, I forget who said the quote. I see Gene in the chat saying, "I think he's dead."
Well, I mean, at the end, Zack also says that line where he quotes Sephiroth saying, "Worlds merge, so do they part."
Yeah.
And then he kind of leaves off on that, saying, "I wonder if worlds can merge again." So I don't think at that point in time he is actually in the Beagleverse, right? I think at that point in time he's thinking about how he can get back to it.
So
Go on, Max.
And I agree with you. Where that's my first interpretation. I was like, so how is Zack gonna get to our world, which is clearly where they want him to be, right? What's the goal here? Do we want him in his own unique universe anymore? Will we do the same thing we did for part 2? I don't know about that. I think we want to get Zack into our world to have all the interactions with our characters. We want him to be talking, and we want him to get the fucking letters, bro. Like, all the stuff from Crisis Core needs to come around. So I started thinking about it. So how does he get back here? Does he find like a materia? Does he find a hole that he goes into? That all seems very weird because he isn't aware of this shit. He doesn't know how this stuff works like Aerith does. So then I thought of it simpler. Oh, what if he's just in ours? What if he's saying the thing that is happening? He's like, so what if they can come back together?
As if because it's happened.
Yeah, and that's a mystery, right? There's a mystery. There's no beagle. There's no information. The flowers are alive. That's all we get. But I think that is the point of his role in the next game when we get to play as him again. He gets to discover that, and we get to discover as players, oh, he's with us. And our party is separated from him. He's going to go to Shinra and he's going to run into fucking Reeve or some shit. And he's going to have to get this information that like, oh, everyone's alive here? What, the dog cat thing lives? That's weird. Yeah. He died to me. Yeah. So I think to a certain degree, we're going to discover with Zack that he's with us. And I honestly feel that we're going to utilize Zack when Cloud's gone.
Right. Yeah. And you know who would have done that though is Aerith, because it was kind of shown that I guess Aerith and like the White Whispers were actually returning everyone to their world.
Yes.
So if Zack is with Cloud and everyone, that would be through the intention of Aerith. At least that's what it implies.
It would have made sense that way, just because of the way that Zack is set up with Aerith. Sort of everyone's been describing it like a chess game. I'm gonna move Zack over here, and then when I can, and it's able to, when the worlds merge, move him back to the world that I need him to actually be in, and then just have it play out that way. Because I'm gonna go off on some level of Crisis Core Loveless stuff, but one of the things that Genesis really needed in the end of the game was the gift of the goddess, which was essentially a cure for his degradation. And he thought that was the life stream. Let me absorb all this power, and that's what's going to cure me. But in developer commentary, what they say is that it ends up being Zack who saves Genesis ultimately. And then you have this sort of... So Zack is the gift of the goddess in that sense. And now we have Zack in Rebirth. His presence seems to be acting in the same way, where he's talking to Biggs and he's sort of like pondering on the question of like, why are we here? Yeah. But Zack's presence alone is sort of it. And I did notice this, and yes, inspirational / perhaps healing the planet. So I don't know.
I like that, because the funny thing is that what's the impression at the end of this game? Zack is the ultimate Chad. He is Chad Bro 9000. Like Yuffie's in love with him. Everybody that runs into this guy, they're their best friend, or we love him. The player is in love with him as well. Like the audience loves him. So I think they're utilizing him in that way, where I kind of love that idea that, oh yeah, Zack is effectively like a tool of the planet to fix shit.
Yeah, people are walking around eating his hair and everything too.
This will solve the space cancer. Just eat some of Zack's hair.
Eat some of the hair.
No.
But yeah, that's ultimately what it makes sense. Sorry.
Do you guys think he walks away alive by the end of?
Hell no.
I don't think so. No.
I don't think he personally. I don't think he gets defeated. Right. I think him and Cloud remain triumphant at the end of this shit. I think him and Cloud and the party and everybody, they come together, they defeat Sephiroth in his mind prison, similar to, but at the end of this, I think he's gone. I think him and Aerith are big, dead, gone, dead. Like, we just sort of reset things back to the way they should be.
Yeah, I think he realizes that his part is that specifically. Like, he's brought back for this purpose, but in the ultimate grand scheme of things, he has to
he's a guest.
Yeah. Yeah,
he effectively died before, but now he gets a chance to peek into what would it have been like if I lived, for a little bit, not permanently, not like we're gonna go on, smoochy dates. I think we're gonna get at least enough to sort of like get that resolution.
I think you guys actually set it up really well with like how this pays off is that Zack is probably going to be reintroduced to the party when Cloud is absent. Yeah. But the other thing that sets this up is the Buster Sword. Is that they've made such a big deal about the two Buster Swords, and now you have one of the Buster Swords with the black materia in it. So what's probably going to happen is that we're going to lose that Buster Sword, and that's when we lose Cloud. And then when we lose Zack, we get the similar scene of him passing the Buster Sword back to Cloud. So that is how you get the one Buster Sword back.
Oh, that's fucking cool. I like that. I like that. I'm thinking of it in my head. That's cool.
That's a good cook. Yeah. Here's my stance on it. Probably going to be the least popular one. One of them's got to live. One of them's got to have a different fate. It's either got to be Aerith or Zack. I think that's got to be the part 3 payoff for the meta plot is just one change. Otherwise, it is just we're no longer. That's true. It's really hard for us to say that it's a sequel. So I think one of them lives, and my money's a little bit on Zack somehow. I do agree though that there is this weird setup thing where it's like the language was a little too unambiguous about like the merging of worlds or them that were torn apart by Zack, they can come back together. That line does seem like it's a setup for something that hasn't happened yet, but it is just hard enough to read that we could say, well, he just doesn't know. Like, how would he know if he's alive or not?
If there's one thing Zack is, he's a dope.
Yeah, and
he's a lovable dope.
It's hard to say. I don't know if I like that, but I do think that, I mean, it's really hard to justify the entire meta plot with only like we got new new scenes with people. We got more
Yeah.
time with Zack, and I think it does kind of. I think one of the things about it that is uneasy with me is that it subverts one of the themes of Zack's whole, shtick, which is, at least in Rebirth, is that he's making this choice, and the choices are defining reality.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, we literally actively see it happen.
which leads me to this next question, and I think this is probably going to be a brief question because it's a very esoteric. Nojima recently revealed that Carl Jung, collective unconscious, and the Buddhist principle of Yogacara were instrumental in helping him construct the world system. So how do you think this impacts the way things will unfold in Part 3, and what does it say about the nature of the narrative? And I know that at least TheNightSkyPrince, you're pretty familiar with Yogacara. Do you want to break that down a little? Or do you want me to explain these concepts first?
I would prefer if you explain them first.
Does anybody else want that?
You would definitely need explanation on a broad level for everybody else.
Okay, so Jung's collective unconscious is it's basically this, just in a nutshell, it's this idea that we all have, all humans have these traits, or like memories and traits that are shared outside of our physicality, sort of like memes or memetics, right? So it's this idea that there's this underlying unconscious, similar to the live stream, that gives us traits outside of our own individuality. And then Yogacara is this idea that basically reality is defined through our perception of it. And so things like, manifesting hopes and dreams, having a concrete reflection on reality, are really essential to the way that Yogacara works.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're seeing with Zack is something that's very akin to one of the common interpretations of Yogacara, in that the way that you perceive reality changes it. And so he talks about, before he says the corniest shit you've ever heard and jumps off a cliff and says, "Smell you never," or "See you never," he has this fucking banger speech where he talks about making choices. Sorry about my cat. Making choices, and how that he's done being at the behest of other people.
Yes.
And so that's sort of, I think, one of the places we've already seen choice. And then the other thing that we're seeing that kind of pop up is we were talking about Cloud's infinite potential. Like, does he have the ability to write reality? Are these things? So what do you guys think regarding these concepts? You want to start, Ryan? TheNightSkyPrince?
Yeah, because I kind of jumped the gun on this one earlier. I think that we've been thinking in terms of like the 4D chess with Sephiroth and Aerith, I think, for the past like 4 years since Remake came out. And I think that Cloud's role in this is bigger than we may actually think. I think during like post-Remake discussions, a lot of the conversations that people were having were like, who's the time traveler, right? Was it
Aerith or Sephiroth? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, like, again, the third secret thing is that Cloud is the time traveler.
That's a good point, considering where Part 3 is going. What happens to Cloud just in the OG game in general, like his realization, his fucking self-realization, which is like, oh, okay, it's sort of like very connected to what Nojima's already talking about. Yeah, I don't know how it's going to pay off in a certain way, because ultimately, we are already seeing the pieces in place, but it's just like they're literally making the pedestal for it right now, and it's like, oh, this is going to happen. It's just that we have to wait until that. I feel like that scene, I feel like there was something I was most excited in this game. It wasn't Aerith's death. It was the Bugenhagen scene. And we were all like, yo, Bugen, bro, tell me about timelines, dude.
Yeah.
Lay it on me. You're going to know. I'm going to love it. And then we get there, and he's an asshole. He doesn't know shit. And he gaslights Tifa, and I don't like you. So they turned Bugenhagen into the fucking Wizard of Oz in this game. I'm like, that was not expected. Okay. So, but now it's like, okay, so if there's one thing I'm really looking forward to, obviously in the next game, is this pedestal they're setting up with Cloud of all these like elements and him potentially being way bigger and even more important. Sephiroth is clearly, you're really important to me. Aerith is like utilizing him in certain ways, trying to like bring him over. He's like this weird pseudo Luke Skywalker that can go in any direction right now. That obviously part 3 is setting up that realization moment to be.
Right. And there's, that moment in the edge of creation where Sephiroth is trying to kind of, raise Cloud up, win him over to his side. Not that it would ever happen, but Sephiroth needs Cloud, and I don't think what they're teasing in that scene is needing him in the same way that like the concept of like, oh, a Cloud like emotionally holding on to Sephiroth keeps him alive in the live stream. I think that's like the surface level read if you know all the compilation material, but I think it's going in deeper than that Cloud somehow has this unique power or ability that nobody else possesses, and that is probably the real mystery here. And I think Chatley was the one who kind of did. I mean, what Chatley said there was basically that you gave him a soul.
Yeah,
you Pinocchio'd him.
Yeah, and that I think that also ties into clear materia stuff, like Cloud's potential, but right now it's not there. Like right now it is hollow, it's empty, but it needs to be filled in some way. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, hollow. I get it.
I do think that is an interesting perspective to have about Cloud, because it makes me think of the one sequence because we've talked in the past, many of us, about the potential of Cloud, the Chadley sequence. The only time in this game where that becomes almost entirely too clear to me is the sequence where Sephiroth is falling down from the water altar and he's going to stab Aerith, and then all of a sudden no whispers are controlling him anymore, and he just lets out the most passionate like no. That feels like Cloud to me in that moment, like just true to himself, and he's taking all of the autonomy for himself, which is his power. And then he strikes Sephiroth's sword, and then Aerith, I think, edits that moment, like to sort of like save him to a certain degree. But in that moment, it does feel like that's the power that you're talking about.
And to even echo what you're saying of like this like subtext level of power that he sort of has, I think this is manifested in physical ways in Advent Children. This bitch literally like gets like DBZ level 4 aura around himself in I think it's the complete version when Sephiroth is about to like kill him, gets this like emanating aura around him, and then separates his body from himself to grab every single one of I even back in the day, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Who taught his ass this, dude? So I think we're already getting like a hint at it of like just Cloud's actual ability and / potential a little bit in Advent Children, just through visual representation,
I mean, even kind of the Nibelheim incident, right? Like, he like ran up on Sephiroth and killed him.
Yeah,
he was stabbed.
There's a little gameplay hint for that, and it's that Cloud only is the only one with preemptive materia. the old hint. It is that he snuck up on him.
That's BltzZ's favorite.
I made a short about that, and the comments I get daily on that are friggin' hilarious. Just the amount of people that don't know like what's going on, and they're like, there's no way that could happen. That's Zack's equipment. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Cloud picked up the Buster Sword and removed it out of the equipment, and then went stab. Is that what you're saying right now? Is that
5D chess in multiple directions?
When you get a chance, go to that short and just read the comments. Like every day, it'll make your day a little bit better if you're ever having a down day.
I think they've always hinted that Cloud was special in some way, but it's never been fully elaborated upon.
Even in the old game, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that they are going to fully reveal what it is that makes him special, or what that special quality it really is.
Yo, he's Glenn's son, bro. That's a special right there.
Oh no.
Don't say that.
Okay,
Don't worry about that.
Real quick,
Let's not even get into that as of yet. And just to also tack on to what NSP was saying, I got that feeling as I was playing through this game. Is there anything this dickhead isn't good at? He's the best chocobo guy. He's the best card player. He's the best this. He's the best that. He just becomes the best at literally everything he puts his mind to. And I get it. It's a video game. It's also the player. But for some reason, I was feeling it way more just in terms of Rebirth as an experience where it's like, whatever Cloud does, he's just the best at. That's weird.
Right.
Yo, even
Like,
dancing.
Yeah.
Like, did you do all the quests on the first playthrough? What do you call it? The ultimate party animal one?
Yes.
And like right at the end of there, he just like, he doesn't want to dance. He's just like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then he just starts like killing it with like breakdancing moves.
And then
like,
all of a
spinning around
sudden,
like a Ninja
he
Turtle.
is like what the fuck am I? It's a joke. I get it, but at the same point, it's like, yeah, Cloud isn't just the everyman. No, he's everything man.
Yeah.
Like he's done everything. He can do anything. Like it's very. I feel like it's almost in the same way that NSP is saying it's like a limitless sort of character, where they're sort of alluding towards something in the fact that like why does he just have like all the girls swooning over him? Now other characters are making topics about that because he's like the ultimate fucking main character type shit, which is also potentially meta because Mr. JRPG is Cloud, right? Just a little bit of like Sakurai has seen the same thing. If I want to put a JRPG character into my fighting game, it's going to be Cloud. It's like the same sort of. There could be a little bit of a meta commentary going on there.
Limits were made to be broken. That's what he says in Smash.
Yeah. Well, also too, I think there's a common like JRPG trope that not only do you fight God, but you are also God kind of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an aspect of that underlying in Final Fantasy VII that they're kind of bringing out here.
When Cloud gets those moments where he really gets into like these out of character things, like when he's talking, he's hyping up the Junon like soldiers, and he just like gets really into. He's about to start screaming and going crazy, and then they pull him back. They're like, all right, okay, you had enough. Let's go. Let's move on. And then he does it again with like with Dio when he beats Dio when they first get to Gold Saucer, and he's like getting into it, like striking his hands, like, yeah, I just did that. Just seeing him realize that he has this potential, that he has no idea that he's capable of doing these things, is like one of the most wonderful things to like witness as the player. It just feels so good every single time they hit it on screen.
Another thing that's probably going to be super enhanced by that, like we were saying, his live stream sequence in the next game, where maybe he actually gets an understanding of his potential. Maybe the materia starts glowing because it is representative of his potential type of stuff. Yeah, and that is an enhancement, right? We were talking about a lot of this stuff where these story elements, this defying fate, like all of this stuff, how does it like enhance the story without having characters that were supposed to die live? I feel like that does good enough a job for me, where some of the things that were present in the old game now are being amplified in certain ways, not given like direct explanation. Like, now do we need to know everything about Boba Fett? No, but let's enhance why Cloud is the way he is by introducing these materia things, these sort of like self-realization, existential sort of elements. It's like, I think there's so much space for the next game to just like be the most aggressive catharsis of Final Fantasy VII fandom, and I'd say, I guess I have to use the term of just giving the fans exactly what they want, right? I think the next game is going to be a lot of that without feeling super pandery.
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike. Speaking of trying to get that balance right, is Glenn Cloud's dad Sleepezi?
Shut up! Shut up! Why did you put this on me? That was the worst. I don't want that, but I also think it's totally possible. Is this a serious question?
Yeah, it's
a serious question.
Yes, he is the father of Cloud's
strife.
Yes, bro.
Shut up,
bro.
I don't
look,
want it, bro. Stop.
All right, listen. Whenever Glenn was on screen, all I could think of is like, damn, that motherfucker looked like Cloud. Like, that's all I could think of the whole time. I was like, and like as his hair is growing out, it even spikes up the same way Cloud's does.
I hope they never outright confirm it.
BltzZ
Yes,
told me.
Never address it.
Just like
never
told me.
If it sorry, what?
Nothing.
Oh,
Don't worry.
I'm just like, oh God, man, just the character himself is something for sure that I was really looking forward to seeing how he will exist in Rebirth, and I just did not enjoy any of the scenes that he was in. It was just kind of like
I don't think I enjoyed any of them until the end.
The last one. To me, it feels like they like brought out Arden from Final Fantasy 15, just the way that he maneuvered in scenes.
It was not that based, but go on.
Yeah, Arden's pretty sick.
He was trying to emulate him.
I feel like it didn't really pay off until the very end, where it's like, oh, Sephiroth is just using your memory of this guy to manipulate the shit out of you. Like, oh, I'm cool with that. Now it makes sense.
I mean, there is some supporting lore for both arguments, right? Like, one, there is Ever Crisis is hard to follow because, well, it's Ever Crisis, but there is one weird scene where Glenn gets transported to Nibelheim through some portal, and he's like, I've never been here before. But we know that in Traces of Two Pasts, he like lived in Nibelheim with Claudia. He met her as his innkeeper, and he was handsome and came in like the wind, and then just went into the mountains when he was old enough to walk, and then they'd never found a body, but they found his clothes, which is never a good sign. It always means that fucker's coming back somehow. There's also the 2000 Gil thing. So we find out in the weird short story that came out with the World Preview book that Cloud got the 2000 Gil thing as like a price point for what he charges and stuff.
Yes,
he got that from his dad somehow. And then we know in Ever Crisis that Glenn regularly brings up, like, owes $2,000 to two different people, therefore owing 4,000 people. So it's a weird connection. So it's possible maybe he lost his memory. There's another weirder thing. Claudia technically had to have had Cloud when she was 17. Glenn was also 17.
All right, just throw this out.
Time.
As somebody that has not done any backstory to this and have read interpretations from people on Twitter that have heard this theory, somebody lined up the events and it didn't make sense. Like, it was off by a year and a half or some shit of like Cloud's birth.
Believe me, we've done all the research. It's only possible. It's only possible with like memory loss. So like the only way. But there is the 17-year-old thing where it's like if they're both 17, it's not as bad, like, so it is like a weird thing to make them both 17 when Cloud was born. So it's possible that if you read traces that he went into the mountains, maybe lost his memory because of some Genova stuff up in the mountains.
Sure.
Or whatever. It also makes it super even creepier, like yet another way for Sephiroth to totally infect Cloud's life. If he somehow is emulating his dad and then like messing with Rufus. That being said, there's the thing where he has no idea where Nibelheim is, and so like they would have to force it in so hard. So,
it's so left field, bro. Just in general, just the thought in general. It is.
I hate it too. I think there's that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's that. I hate it.
I think that was all very well founded. Babyseal, I think that you did a lot of research. I believe the stranger on the internet that Max is talking about. Clearly, this information doesn't make any sense.
Fair enough.
Doesn't line up at all.
They left it so that they could go either way. I feel like.
Yeah, they want to see what the fans think.
Yeah, they're probably like testing to see how people feel about it first. So we probably just killed the possibility right now.
All hands.
But how does it? So like, think about it over. How does it enhance the story? Like the relationship with Sephiroth and Glenn and stuff like that has to be the crux of it. There has to be like a big thing there that makes it more important later on. So how does it enhance the story?
I don't know.
I know. Right now we definitely, because we don't know if it's real yet. Number one, so you have to like think far ahead, broad stroke. How does him like coming up to his father that because Cloud seemingly has never met his dad or has had any importance and impact on his life at all, right?
Right. But it also adds values to the shareholders when more people download Ever Crisis.
This is a good point. That is a good point. You have to play Ever Crisis to find out.
Yeah, you can play this game and play as Cloud's dad
Now, we did learn too, and this was good news for me, and is that Glenn was an idea for Rebirth that got added to the First Soldier and Ever Crisis later. So at least we know that Nojima has some kind of idea for it. I'm hoping they never answer the question of Cloud's dad. I think that's one of those mysteries that really needs to stay there, especially given that he's got like all this weird potential. You know, like
Sure.
Us never knowing if his dad is, you know, like, I don't know, some weird Cetran god, and that's an explanation. Or Glenn, I'm way better never knowing an answer and it never being midichlorians and it not being Glenn. So
He has the entirety of Loveless tattooed on his back.
That's my tattoo you're talking
the missing
about.
chapter.
The missing chapter is tattooed on Glenn's back. We have to find his body.
And for clarity for everyone, I'm not like really pushing him being Cloud's dad necessarily. I just think that like the setup is there if they want to cast the check.
It is. No, for sure. Like
It's
he
definitely
looks like
ambiguous
him,
enough.
dude.
Yeah, he looks so much like him.
But
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say it's the number one question that I was asked to ask
Okay.
Are you serious?
by like a fair
That's funny.
margin.
That is that's funny to me.
So I had no desire to ask it.
In the only defense of like, oh, Cloud looks a lot like Glenn. Sure, I'm with you, but also does his fucking mom. Like his mother looks just like him. So it's kind of weird that the mother and the father look like they're siblings already. Like it's a little weird.
Agreed. And the naming,
I like
if the dad's not named Claudio, what are they doing?
Claudio, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so let's get to a big question here. So one of the most interesting questions for me in the Ultimania was that there was a question about the final entry and what are things you're enthusiastic about in the conclusion, and what Nomura answered was weird. He said, Kitase threw some homework my way. He requested the inclusion of a certain very major something that wasn't in the original game. I thought to myself, man, that's a real doozy of a proposal. But now I'm sort of sitting on it thinking, what he pitched to me. If we can pull it off well, I think it's an idea that will leave everyone pleased. What do we think that could possibly be?
Cloud's dad.
So
yeah,
they were saying that was in regards to the original FF7. They had this thought.
So Kitase came up to Nomura and said, "Please put this in the remake project."
Okay.
And it wasn't in the original.
Okay, I think I read this one. Yeah, and guess what my interpretation of that dialogue is? It was Advent Children scene.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like, okay, yeah, let's emulate the Advent Children fight with Sephiroth or something, some big iconic moment from that film. Fusion Sword Cloud playable.
Yeah, I think that the Fusion Sword has to be in the game some way, right? And mechanically it has to work. I'm trying to think that from a game design perspective, again too, because the whole conversation there to me sounds like, how do we make that work with our existing systems, right? And
or even our story.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I think that the Fusion Sword kind of fits the bill very specifically too, because the Fusion Sword would probably have its own mechanics separate from, say like the Buster Sword or any of the other swords that you get in the game. And so, I mean, obviously, I think that everyone and their mom wants to see the Fusion Sword come to part 3.
And another realization, similar to what you're saying, everyone and their mom, yes, because the majority or a large part of Final Fantasy VII fandom might not have even played Final Fantasy VII, but of Advent Children. Like Advent Children was an insanely influential movie, regardless of how good the storytelling is or anything like that. It's a movie that for the time was ridiculously influential on the video game industry and the film industry. So a lot of people just know of Advent Children shit, but they don't even know of FF7, much less FF7 characters. So I would like to think that there's already been enough little crumbs that have been placed throughout this stuff of Advent Children existence. When are we just going to say it, dude? When are we just going to acknowledge that, like, oh, this shit happened, or are you going to let us play it? So in a way, I think that satisfies everybody. I think everyone is sort of cool to like relive that moment from the movie in a game.
Yeah,
I love
you guys
it.
are cooking with that. I think so
Yeah.
too. Yeah, because like it's not even just the fusion like sword, but like all the other elements within it. Having children is iconic in that way. Like people know about those specific scenes. I know people that are just hanging out sometimes and they just throw it on the last 45 to like an hour of the film.
Just the fight scenes.
Yeah, just the fight scenes.
Just the fight scenes.
I have a friend that edited just the fight scenes like as a thing you just watch. Yeah, this is.
And to be real, I don't know if you guys went to go see it in theaters again. It had been years since I saw it, but the fight scenes are still fucking good. Like they still hold up super well. I was like, dang, this movie's still not bad for 2005. So, you know, I think even Nomura and Katase and everybody else is kind of aware of that it has like this lasting power.
Dude, I have an interesting like perspective with that. I've seen it like I downloaded it on torrent back in the day. Don't know Japanese whatsoever. We were just watching it just to like
we all watched it. We all watched it no subbed back in the day for the first time.
I was like, this is godlike, bro. I need to see more of this. And so when I went recently to the theaters, I brought my girlfriend who she's like really fresh on like FF7 stuff. I've told her about the story once. She likes it. She digs it. She knows the characters. So when she saw this movie, she's looking over to me constantly. She's like, what did you bring me here to watch? Like, this is like she's like, the dialogue is so like weird. I don't understand what the hell's going on. And I'm like, yo, I tried to tell you, bro. Like, you didn't have to come. I was going to come here by myself. And then she got to like the action scenes. And at the very end, she's like, I see why people love this. I see why Sephiroth is such a big deal. And even she fell in love with Sephiroth. She's like, Sephiroth is badass. He's really cool. She got to see so many of those iconic moments, but from like a fresh lens and seeing her perspective on it, I'm like, yeah, she gets it.
Yeah, because even the storytelling during the fight scenes, when the storytelling is not in fighting, is weird, but during fighting it's actually kind of cool, and you feel like you're relating to characters as cool shit is happening. All the stuff of them elevating Cloud, everyone bringing Cloud, Aerith grabbing Cloud literally to go fight this big space monster thing is like, yeah, this is cool. Like, all this stuff is relatively like absorbable. It's just when things slow down and you get one-on-one dialogue, you start to lose a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, my answer to the question is it's going to be Genesis. Okay, last question. And,
Love it.
What to you represents the core narrative climax of Final Fantasy VII? And how should Part 3 bring this climax to fruition in a satisfying and fresh way?
I have an answer. Go ahead, Blitz.
I got you, yo. My favorite moment in the OG game, every time we play this game yearly on stream, I love it every single time, is the live stream sequence. Tifa's one of my favorite characters, like seeing her finally like take charge and actually help piece this man back together. That whole element was kind of shown to us in a way, in a way they actually showed it to us in Rebirth, which blew my mind. I had no idea that was coming. So seeing
that was shocking as shit, dude. We're like, what, we're doing this now? What?
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be even bigger in Part 3 because now Tifa has the elements down. She's like, oh, I've been here before. I know exactly where this window right here. Yeah, I know exactly where we got it. Like, so it's the impact is going to be even more crazier, I think. Highly anticipating, like, as going to be like a really big moment for me again, and overall for like everybody else. Like, that scene is it just does things to me, bro. Like, I love the way the energy is, the way that dialogue is done, the music. Like, when Tifa starts to talk about her mother, and then that song plays. It's like the only time that song ever plays in the game. That song
was so good.
Yeah, that the whole vibes of that entire element,
it's
just
mega
building,
sad.
Yeah.
Like the emotional peaks of those moments, and like when Tifa and Cloud talk to each other, like after the live stream sequence, and when Aerith and Cloud are like with each other in the dream, the emotional beats of those moments have like the heights that you wanted from the ending when Aerith dies, but you don't get it during the ending because we are unreliable narrator along with Cloud. Yeah, and I see a lot of people saying like they don't think that that's going to happen, that Tifa won't be the one directing this scene, or it won't happen in general. And I'm like, no. This is a huge moment in the original game. Like, there's no way this is not going to be in Part 3, regardless of the fact that they've showed us a little bit of a teaser of it for reasons unknown yet, to maybe show us that Tifa has a little bit of an influence, or like she's live stream sensitive. Yes, she's aware of that. She's seeing things that she should not or would not be seeing normally. So I think it's going to ultimately have a bigger impact in that way, and still be like one of the biggest moments coming up forward.
We'll let Max answer this question last because I think it's going to be a banger. Ryan, how about you?
So objectively, it's the live stream sequence, but since everyone is gonna answer the live stream sequence,
we all know.
I'm gonna be a contrarian and
I love it.
and have like like a cool personality and such. So my vote is actually going to be for the moment that Cloud defeats Sephiroth. I'm gonna go with that.
True finality. Dead.
Yeah, right. And I think that they're already setting up for how that's enhanced. And I think that moment in particular, because to me, that moment in the original game, especially with Cloud, kind of like, the symbolism there of Cloud defeating the Sephiroth in his mind, right? I think the idea of releasing that sort of horror from his head and letting go has, something that I've always found deeply relatable. Something that I think kind of comes after, with the live stream sequence, Cloud becomes who he truly is. He comes forward about everything that's transpired, and he remembers everything clearly. But then, it's kind of like, what happens after that? How do you then confront the big issues in your life after you kind of have gotten over that? And I want to see symbolism with Sephiroth and him defeating that part of himself, detaching himself from Sephiroth.
Like it's finally gone kind of moment.
Exactly. So that's for me. That's what I'm gonna go with.
That's a really good second choice. It's wrong, but I appreciate that you did it.
I know. I acknowledge it.
I mean, he takes the hollow materia, inserts it into the Buster Sword. It turns into some new color we've never seen before. It's unique to Cloud, and then he just slices Sephiroth's cheeks.
Yeah, yellow flower materia. Yeah,
mega spank.
I love it. So I'll answer, and then I'll let the two theory gods close us out. Mine is definitely, it's not just the live stream sequence is the crux of the OG for me. It's the crux for the devs too. I think the entirety of this plot, the entirety of the meta plot, the entirety of the remake project is culminating and in service of the live stream sequence to the point where I think that it will have that core scene with Tifa reminding Cloud, who he is, but I think it will involve other characters too, and I think that it will extend across the entire game. And part of the reason I think that is something that I put in chat, which is that the rift in the sky, the rainbow rift in the sky,
I'll pull it up on screen
matches the rift in Cloud's mind sequence. So the entire third game is the live stream sequence in some way, shape, or form. And it will all culminate in that. And so I think it has to include other characters. Because everything that we've done in Rebirth is centered around our affinity, meaning Cloud's, affinity with every character. Not just one or two. Like the affinity system does not track affinity between Tifa and Barret. It's Cloud and Tifa, Cloud and Barret, Cloud and Aerith, Cloud and Red 13. These are all of the relationships that Cloud is building himself with. And you know, what is Cloud's core power before he stabs Sephiroth in the Nibelheim reactor incident? It's, he's mourning his friends. What about all the people? You find out Cloud's true nature is pure compassion. Even the cheesy thing he says before he does Omni/5.0 is like, there's nobody I don't care about. Yes. I love everyone. And
but he can't say it. Yeah. Right? That's what's amazing about him. He can't say it because he's a weird introverted kid.
That's right. That's Cloud. That's what makes him wonderful. That's
best like why MC. I'm sorry. I'm gonna throw it out there. Best main character. I know a lot of people don't like him. There's been a lot of interpretations, but I'm just like, dude, this character's amazing.
Mm-hmm. He's it. Yes. So I think Aerith's true death will feed this. Like where we finally see what really happens. I think Aerith will be there in some way. It doesn't, and I think that because there is an acknowledgement, not to be super controversial or anything, but Cloud obviously has feelings for all of these characters, including Aerith, and that's got to be, I think, represented in a grander way this time for it to pay off. So that's my answer. The entire third part is the live stream sequence. And it may even culminate, like the final portion of it may culminate in Sephiroth's defeat.
I'm going to be really quick.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just to wrap it up. But I'm literally going to take both your idea, because that's smart, Clark, and I'm going to take yours, NSP, and just say that that's also live stream sequence is what they've been building up to this entire time. Yes. They have explained in Advent Children that inside of all of us is the consciousness of other people, which kind of goes back to the sort of spiritual aspects that have already been sort of discussed. And then you have the live stream sequence with the empty materia. I think as Cloud puts his mind back together, you're going to get all of those collective consciousnesses sort of piecing together what will ultimately become the materia that you use. I think that that's where it all will be like, not only are you getting the resolution of Aerith, you're getting the resolution of Cloud. Tifa's dealing with Aerith's loss at the same time as Cloud, and then you have the materia all being put together. That sounds like a good goddamn remake of Final Fantasy VII to me.
Yeah, dude, that's a lend me your energy type shit, like for Dragon Ball, like sort of like the collective energy of everybody on this planet is going to go into this sword to whoop your ass.
That's it for me.
Yeah, everything you guys are saying is making me so fucking excited for the next game, because all I've been doing is reinforcing that, like, you watch the ending and it's like confusing and weird, and you have to sit on it for a bit for it to come to conclusions that feel like good, that feel like, oh, I think I have a understanding of what's going on, but also a misunderstanding, because there's clearly misdirection everywhere from the developers almost intentionally. So yeah, if we're talking about big themes, I actually agree with everything you guys are saying. Cloud's realization is sort of Cloud's self-realization is one of the biggest moments of Final Fantasy VII OG, and is going to be effectively the crux of this entire series. And they're riding on it, and they're betting on it so hard. The devs bet on it so hard that they're willing to lose the ending. They're willing to sacrifice Aerith's death. The emotional balance of Aerith's death is going to be lost so we can enhance the next one. I now understand what Nomura said a year ago, where he's like, I'm terrified of how people will be playing this game. Like, the impressions people will have. He was scared of how people would interpret part 2. I completely understand, because they're betting hard. It's all going, the entire bet is going on part 3, where we're going to make this the biggest it can possibly be. Are they going to be able to pull it off? I don't know. We haven't watched Return of the King yet. You know, we're at 2 Towers right now. I don't know. All I can say is I'm very confident, because as much as the confusing parts of Remake, much less Rebirth, were, the weird, confusing last 10%, last 5 to 10% of both of these games is weird and confusing, almost intentionally so. But what is the rest of the game? Some of the best character writing, lore building, new story elements that I have like ever experienced in games. I love it. I love it. And then it culminates to something that's kind of wild and setting up for future games, but we don't get this anymore. We don't get this podcast after this, right? In the next game, this not really going to exist. This is their chance to do it. So what do they do now? Well, they give us that they set up for so much potential where we don't even know where the fuck it's going to go, because obviously the devs are aware of this too. So to me, if we're talking about like finality and themes and stuff like that, and probably the most important part is the very end, is after all of this shit, after everything, after all the events have transpired, is Zack alive, is Aerith gone, all this stuff, I think we're going to be returning back to something that is like a neutral situation. I don't know if the fate of defying fate stuff is going to culminate in a satisfying way that like seems like that means she's gonna live or he's gonna live, right? I don't know if they have the 30-year cook for that. I really feel like we're gonna get a satisfying ending in the same way that Advent Children has a really satisfying ending, where we have our character on a goddamn motorcycle traveling the world delivering shit, but he's able to live his own life finally without the burden and grief that has been haunting him for nearly 10 years. And he's just able to be with the people he loves and experiencing life for like the first time. How does he experience that life? Well, we don't exactly know. It's just, he gets to do whatever the hell he wants to do. I fucking love that ending. I love it. I think it's so good and also interpretive of where the story could go from that point forward.
Jeez, man.
100%.
You guys, this podcast was 4 years? 4 years in the making? 4 years cooking?
I'd say 5. 'Cause I had people back in 2019 when I was making remake videos were like, do a video with like Maximilian, dude. I was like, dude, it'd be easier for me to get the president on.
And to be real, there was a lot of like, I'd say, contention from me just based on the way like certain sides of the fan base were acting at the end of this game, and my thoughts around a certain character not just being themselves, where it's like, I don't know if that is that character or not, man. Like if it is directly represented here or could potentially show up in the next game, I still think that's going to happen. And those are like, you know, Genova showing up and manipulating people is something that I think will be used to an nth degree in the next game. But there was a moment where I wanted to step back and not talk about this stuff. And then as more stuff was being revealed, more information came out from Ultimanias, more people found cool shit about, like, we didn't even talk about the credits sequence, guys, how they just omit scenes from the game. And they're just like, hey, so apparently this doesn't happen according to the developer's canon. It's like, what the fuck is going on? There's so much cool shit that I love it. I absolutely love the way they've approached this series, and I completely understand from a lot of perspectives of why it isn't giving them exactly what they want. And for me, it's doing everything I want, and I don't get it. I feel like I am being personally pandered to throughout a lot of this remake trilogy. And I don't get it to a certain degree. I hope I'm not a manipulator. I hope I'm not fucking Genova or something like that at the end of this whole thing. But to me personally, Rebirth landed in my number 3 spot of my favorite games of all time. It took Resident Evil 4 from that spot. So Rebirth, in my opinion, isn't. I don't even think they can top this for the next game. It was so good. I can't even fathom how you're going to make an experience like this that just kept one-upping and one-upping and one-upping throughout it eclipse that in a follow-up title. I don't even know how you can do that. But I'm open to you guys, the developers, doing that. I'm open to it. I just can't see it. You know, I just can't. We're talking about it. We had a whole podcast discussing how amazing it could be, and it probably will hit those beats, but that hasn't happened yet. So I'm just going to leave myself open. I'm not gonna write the future ahead of me where I'm going to be happy or not happy about the next game. I'm just going to sit here and realize that Rebirth was one of my favorite games I've ever played. I can't even believe it.
Right there with you, man.
Same.
This journey has taken on like a form of itself, you know, like every time we get to the end of one of these games, we are barely scratching the surface of what the message or like the way that the story will unfold. And it's just like this entire journey has been so enjoyable for me personally. And I just engaging with the fans, engaging with the community, meeting each and every single one of you guys, and like sharing these like talks, sharing these moments, and honestly hearing what everybody else has to say about things. Like I had no idea what the hell you guys are talking about with the psychology of the thing that Baby Seal brought up. So I was happy. I was happy to be a fly on the wall for that. I was like, I got no input here, guys. But ultimately, I can't thank you guys enough. The community, the viewers, each single guest on this podcast currently. This definitely won't be like the last one that we do. We're constantly going to keep finding more things. Subtext is going to find more crazy shit with like the credits and blow our minds in that way. I can't thank you guys enough. Like seriously, this was an amazing talk. If there's anything else you guys want to throw out there, shout out. If there's any ending questions or whatever, feel free to do so. I think everybody in the chat knows where to find all of you guys.
I do think there's a moment for us to reconvene and in the future. And it isn't when the next game comes out or after the next game. It's when we finally get some trailers for the next game. When we finally because they've set up like these big 3 scenarios, multiple scenarios of where it can go. And it's like, okay, so the big one for me in the trailers for Rebirth was like, Sephiroth is like the reunion, the merging of worlds. And I was like, you're just gonna say it, dude? Yeah. You just saying it now? So
He just said
it. Like, yeah, I hope that we get that for whatever the next one is, you know, somewhere down the line. We definitely got to wrap back around. What the hell does that shit mean?
Of course,
100%. I just want to say, just quickly, I just appreciate, again, sort of following up what everyone else had said, is that I appreciate all of you guys. All of you have been way beneficial for the Final Fantasy VII community, and your voices are very positive. So I just wanted to say thank you all for like the 4-year ride, whether it's your content or your presence. You guys have been rocking it. So really
Yeah.
excited for the future.
Yeah.
I'd really like to thank Max for being on here. The four of us have been like maybe best friends for like the last, I don't know, 4 years, and we've all like just had fantasy conversations with you, and for it to be real is a really big deal. For all of us.
I find it crazy that we're all on board. Like
Yeah.
all of us are relatively like most of the shit we're talking about. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I did that. Wow, what you said is fucking awesome. I hope they do that shit.
Yeah.
That happened several points throughout this for me. So yeah, to be real, I feel like the thought process that happened at the end of Remake might have been split for some people, but at the end of Rebirth, I feel like we have a good idea of what they want to do, of where they want to amplify and how they want to execute. And now the biggest question is, will they be able to execute? And we're just gonna have to wait and find out.
Yep.
Right.
For sure, man. And you got anything you want to say, NSP? My bad. Sorry.
Oh, nothing. I just said that I have a lot of gratitude for this whole conversation. This was great.
Like you said, in 2019, you were doing this stuff, so it's like it's crazy to see how we all like come together in that way. And it just keeps on going. We got another good 4 years of this.
3. According to Vegeta, it's 3. According to him, he said like 3 years.
Oh, which would line up with the anniversary.
2027 anniversary, 30-year anniversary. Yep. The 30-year cook will finally be done.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
The 30-year cook is finally going to be complete. Oh, we didn't even talk about how Gina Talk narrates the first fucking trailer.
Oh,
Not at all.
No, we
Didn't even. There's so much shit, dude.
We'll
be
get
back.
there.
We'll be
Part
back.
2.
We'll be back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back.
We'll circle back to
think
Rebirth before
everybody in the chat,
Afterbirth.
You just created another rename, Max. Everybody really likes Reconvene for part 3.
We're gonna reconvene. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, we're gonna send it off right there. Thank you guys, everybody in the chat. Really do appreciate you all. Keep it rocking, man. I see Susie, I see Gene, I see Subtext in the chat. Shout out to all of you guys. Everybody else, you all take care. This has been an awesome one. 3 hours of just 3.5 hours of us just gushing out. Wow.
That did not feel like 3.5 hours. My God.
It just flew on by. All right.
Maybe 1 at tops.
All right. It was great talking with everybody. Have a good one, guys.
Same here, man.
Absolutely.